Hello, everyone. Tonight, we journey into a world lit only by fire. The kind of night where shadows stretch long across stone walls and the silence is broken only by the distant howl of a wind that's never quite warm. We're headed to a place where morning means survival, and being born a girl means the rules of life are already written for you. It's a time of knights and castles, yes, but not the fairy tale kind. This was real medieval Europe, and once we're in, you might find it hard to claw your way out. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight, and what time is it for you right now? It's always incredible to see just how far and wide this little time machine reaches. Now then, dim the lights, maybe turn on a small fan for that gentle background hum, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Imagine, if you will, a world where the sun is your only reliable clock. You wake and work with it, and when it goes down, so do you, along with your chances of avoiding a stubbed toe, a rat bite, or worse. Electricity hasn't been invented, neither has comfort, but life marches on, muddy boots and all. It is into this world that a baby girl is born. Her name is Alina of Borden. Her home, a thatched roof cottage tucked beside a lord's manor in the English countryside. The year? Let's call it 1325, though nobody around her uses numbers that high for anything but counting sheep. From the moment Alina draws her first breath, her destiny is written in soot, soup bones, and silent expectations. She doesn't know it yet, but the odds are already stacked against her, and not in the modern, motivational poster kind of way, in the grim, statistical sense. Alina has about a 1 in 2 chance of not making it past the age of 5. Not because of curses or witches, but because everything around her, food, water, even the blanket she's swaddled in, is a little bit dangerous. Her mother, Gilda, is already on her 4th child, and the lines on her face are maps of sleepless nights and lost hopes. Alina's birth brings no midwife, no sterile room, no celebratory flowers, just the old woman from 2 cottages over and a rusty knife warmed in the hearth. As the days crawl on, Alina grows, though childhood in her world is less a phase and more of a hallway she's pushed through quickly. There are no toys, no cartoons, no school books. Her learning begins the moment she can walk and carry something at the same time. And even then, she's not really seen as a child in the way we think of children today. She's more like a short apprentice for adult misery. By the age of 4, Alina can tell the difference between barley and rye by touch. She knows not to drink from the well after rain, and she's learned to fear the sound of coughing at night. Playtime is rare, and when it happens, it's usually while helping gather kindling or stirring the family's eternal pot of cabbage stew, more an experiment in endurance than cuisine. Her world is tight. 1 room, 1 fire, 1 dress. She sleeps between her older brother Thomas and the family's goat, who has an annoying habit of chewing her hair while she dreams. There's no such thing as privacy. Everyone shares everything. Space, breath, lice. Warmth is rationed like kindness. When Gilda speaks to her daughter, it's mostly to instruct. Fetch that. Stir this. Don't speak when the Lord's men ride by. And beneath every word is the silent reminder. Stay small. Stay quiet. Stay safe. As Alina grows older, her education deepens, but not in letters or numbers. She learns to sew a hem that doesn't unravel, to stretch dough without wasting flour, to patch a wound with a cobweb, and to accept hunger as a daily companion. Religion is the only formal instruction she gets, not the kind with discussion or nuance, but the kind that teaches her she was born to serve, obey, and suffer with grace. Eve's sin, they say, is why women bleed and birth and break. Alina accepts all of this because she knows no alternative. She has heard of queens, yes, figures like Isabella of France, whose name drips from the lips of gossips like warm honey. But to Alina, a queen is no more real than a dragon. Her world doesn't extend past the fields, the church, and the manor gates. She hears her father speak of marriage, of alliances, of dowries. Not hers yet, not officially. But the tone in his voice is the same as when he talks about livestock: proud, resigned, transactional. By the time Alina reaches 12, she is no longer spoken to as a child. She is a girl woman now, judged by her skill with a needle and the modesty of her gaze. Her hands are calloused, her back aches in the morning, and her dreams, when they come, are often of cold rooms and unfamiliar faces. The village priest once told her that God loves humility. Alina, not knowing any different, has made humility her blanket. It doesn't keep her warm, but at least it doesn't scratch. And so we leave her here, for now, on the edge of what the world has labeled womanhood. The next step is not a sweet 16 or a first dance. It is a contract, a husband, a household not her own. But that, dear listener, is for another night. For now, rest easy knowing that even in the harshest times, someone like Alina managed to survive. And sometimes that was the most rebellious thing a girl could do. Alina of Borden is 13 years old when the conversations shift. They used to talk around her about bread, weather, and which pig was acting strange. Now they talk through her, as if she's no longer a person but a parcel in need of delivery. One evening, she hears her father mutter her name alongside phrases like good match and solid arrangement. Her mother stays silent, stirring the pot with a grip like stone. That night, Alina lies awake, eyes open, counting the flickers in the firelight and wondering which man her father has chosen. Marriage, in her world, is not a celebration. It's not love, nor partnership. It's a transaction wrapped in linen and whispered prayers. At best, a way to secure alliances between families. At worst, an escape route for a mouth that no longer brings in bread. Legally, a girl her age can marry. 12 is old enough to carry children, old enough to leave everything behind. By 14, the decision is made. She's to marry Berwin, an older man from the next village over. He's 30, give or take, which means his beard has been around longer than Alina has walked upright. She's met him once, briefly, when he came to collect a sack of barley and fix a broken fence. He nodded, she curtsied. That was enough. Berwin is not cruel. He's not kind either. He is, in every way, a practical man, and that is all that is required. The wedding happens on a misty morning. There are no flower crowns, no lace, just two families, a priest, and a promise that will shape the rest of Alina's life. She wears her mother's old tunic, let out at the seams and brushed off with wet hands. The hem still smells faintly of smoke. There's no ring, no kiss, just the solemn exchange of vows and the rustle of wool as her hand is placed in his. Someone claps once, someone else sneezes. The priest blesses them. And just like that, Alina of Borden becomes someone's wife. That night, she leaves her family cottage, goat, straw bed, and all, and steps into Berwin's home. It is both similar and unfamiliar. One room, one hearth. But the shadows fall differently here. The silence doesn't know her name yet. Berwin's mother still lives with him, a woman with eyes like frost and a mouth that rarely opens. Alina is told where to sleep, told where to store her shawl, told when to rise, what to cook, and how to clean a wound with salt water. Her duties begin before the rooster and end after the embers have died. No one asks how she's adjusting. There are moments, brief and breathless, when Alina catches herself staring out the window, hoping to see her brothers coming down the lane. But of course, they don't. Her life with Berwin is her new chapter. Her former world was closed with a knot tied tightly by someone else's hands. Soon, the talk turns again. But this time, it's not about husbands, it's about heirs. Berwin wants a son, needs one perhaps, to pass on his plot of land and his pair of oxen. Every time Alina hands him a bowl of stew, she can feel the weight of that expectation pressing down like the steam rising from the broth. At night, she lies stiffly beneath the blanket they now share, her body cold even when his is warm. Her breath is quiet, her thoughts are louder. There's no guidebook, no tender wisdom passed between generations. What Alina knows of womanhood she's learned from watching sheep birth in the field and from whispers swapped by older girls over the water barrel. And now she waits. The village priest says this is her calling. The old women say it's what keeps a household strong. The men say nothing at all. They nod, grunt, and expect. By the time the first signs come, nausea, dizziness, a strange ache in her back, Alina does not smile. She does not tell anyone, not even Berwin. She simply continues to fetch water and sweep ash and count each day with a quiet mounting dread, because she's seen the aftermath before. She remembers a girl named Malus who bled out behind the barn, and another, Bretta, who stopped speaking after the baby came and didn't eat for 3 weeks. The village calls it women's trouble. But the truth? It's just danger dressed in white linen. Still, Alina endures, because that's what she was taught, because there is no other path. And deep down beneath the weariness and the silence she knows, if she brings a healthy boy into this world, she will be praised. If she doesn't, she'll be blamed. There is no middle ground, only fate and how well you follow it. So she waits, one breath at a time. The days grow shorter, and so does Alina's breath. Her belly has begun to round beneath her dress, the fabric now stretched and pinned awkwardly by her mother-in-law's clumsy stitches. The household knows. No one says it aloud, but the signs are there. Extra servings at dinner, fewer chores that involve lifting, and the quiet, sidelong glances from Berwin that linger a little longer each day. Pregnancy, in Alina's world, is not a joyful revelation. It's a test, a countdown, a gamble with no odds and no safety net. She feels the weight of it, not just in her back or her swollen ankles, but in every whispered story she's ever heard. Stories of women who labored for days, of babies who arrived early and never cried, of mothers who bled and never stopped. There is no midwife in their village, only old Helda, who once tied a baby's cord with a sheep's sinew and insists on boiling nettles for strength. Helda has delivered more goats than children, but she is who they have. As Alina nears the end of her term, she wakes up more often in the night. Sometimes it's the baby kicking. Sometimes it's the dreams. Dark corridors, endless stairs, eyes she can't explain. She doesn't talk about them. Berwin wouldn't understand, and his mother would simply mutter about demons and cast a handful of salt near the doorway. Then the pain starts. Not sharp, but steady. A deep ache that rolls in and out like ocean waves, though Alina has never seen the sea. She tries to work through it, clenching her jaw as she scrubs soot from the hearth. But by afternoon, her body gives in. Her knees buckle in the doorway, and Berwin, startled and pale, rushes for Helda. The labor is long. Hours blur into each other. The fire dies and is relit. Water is boiled and spilled. Cloths are wrung and rewrung. Alina screams only once, then bites down on the sleeve of her tunic until it's soaked with sweat and spit. Outside, the wind howls like it knows what's happening. Inside, there is only silence, until a single high-pitched wail breaks it. A boy. They name him Corin. Berwin's shoulders slump with relief. His mother nods once, mutters a prayer under her breath, and returns to the stew she left simmering. Alina doesn't speak. She can't. Her body feels hollowed out, her arms too weak to hold her own son. She sleeps for a full day. When she wakes, Helda is gone, and Corin is crying in the corner, wrapped in a cloth so old the color has bled into something unnameable. Weeks pass. Alina moves slower now. She still aches in places she didn't know could hurt. Feeding Corin is a quiet, desperate task. He latches poorly and cries often. Sleep is brief and broken. Some nights she stares at the thatched ceiling and listens for breath, not her own, but his. The fear of losing him never really goes away. It sharpens every time he coughs, every time his skin feels too warm, every time he sleeps longer than usual. Other women say this is normal. They say it passes. They say she's lucky. She tries to believe them. Corin survives the winter, and with spring comes a sort of rhythm. Alina wakes, feeds him, works, rests, and repeats. She no longer has a name, it seems, just a role: wife, mother, woman. Years pass in seasons, not stories. Corin learns to walk, then talk. He follows Berwin into the fields, helps fetch water. Alina teaches him how to tie bundles of herbs, how to spot the difference between good bread and spoiled crust. But as he grows, so does the expectation. By the time Corin is 7, Berwin is already discussing land. Tools, marriage, one day. Alina says nothing, but her heart folds in on itself like stale dough. She sees the same future rising in front of her son. One with duties and burdens and expectations that will carve lines into his back just like his father's. There is no escaping the cycle, only surviving it. And yet, Alina doesn't feel bitter. She feels tired. There are moments when she finds herself standing in the doorway, staring at the horizon. She watches the birds fly past, headed somewhere she'll never go. Sometimes she hums a song from her childhood, though the words have long since faded. Other times, she forgets what she was doing and just stands there, hands still wet from washing, lost in the thought of nothing at all. Berwin ages with quiet stubbornness. He doesn't change, exactly, just softens. His hands shake a little when he sharpens tools. He no longer walks ahead of her, but beside. He even smiles sometimes, when Corin makes a joke or when the stew isn't burnt. They never speak of love. It's not a word that fits in their house. But there is something, familiarity, perhaps, a kind of weathered understanding, two stones worn smooth by the same river. Alina's hair turns silver at the temples. Her hands become knotted with work. Her back bends little by little until she walks like the women she once helped carry baskets for. And still, life continues. Babies are born in the village. Some live, some don't. Fields are planted, some flood, some flourish. Through it all, Alina endures because that's what she was taught, because that's what women do. One evening, as the fire cracks low and Corin's children sleep on mats near the hearth, Alina leans back and closes her eyes. She is not queen, not saint. Her name is not in any book. But her story, quiet, weathered, and real, has shaped the world more than anyone will ever know. She was born into silence, raised to obey, married without choice, bled without witness, and yet she lived. That, in her time, was nothing short of a miracle. The village changes as villages do, but slowly, like moss growing over stone. Roads that were once muddy tracks are now deeper ruts. The manor has a new lord, but the rules remain the same. Taxes come on time, so do winters. Alina watches it all unfold from the same threshold she's stood in for decades. Her body moves slower now. Her knees ache when it rains. Her fingers, once deft with thread and herb, now tremble if she works too long. She doesn't complain. Complaints are for those with options. Corin is grown. He tends the land now. He's married, a girl named Isbet with kind eyes and a nervous laugh. Alina likes her. They get along the way women in close quarters often do, with short words, long silences, and the occasional shared look that says, "Yes, I understand." Isbet reminds Alina of herself, at least the version of herself that once looked at the world with more questions than answers. She watches Isbet go through the same rhythms, cooking, cleaning, worrying, hoping, and she knows what's coming long before Isbet does. The first baby is lost, not violently, just quietly. A night of pain, a morning of stillness. Alina is there the whole time, holding a damp cloth to Isbet's forehead, whispering prayers, though she's not sure who's listening. They bury the child under the yew tree behind the house. No marker, just memory. Alina doesn't cry. She doesn't know how anymore. But she sits with Isbet every day after, hands wrapped around warm mugs of broth, speaking of nothing, which somehow says everything. When Isbet's second child arrives, a girl, healthy and loud, there's no feast, just relief. Alina cradles the baby with fingers knotted by time, and for a brief moment she feels something flicker inside her. Not joy, exactly, more like recognition. The kind of quiet peace that comes with knowing a cycle has been broken, even slightly. They name the girl Alira. The baby grows, so does the family. Another boy follows, then a second girl. The house is loud again, full of little feet, spilled milk, and laughter that echoes against the low ceiling. Alina doesn't mind the noise. It keeps the silence from getting too comfortable. She tells the children stories when she can, not fairy tales, but truths softened by time, of goats that stole bread, of winters so cold the stew froze in the pot, of a day when the bell tower fell and no one could tell time for a week. She never speaks of Berwin's anger or the ache in her bones after childbirth or how close she once came to giving up. Some stories aren't meant for small ears. Corin builds a second room. It's not much, just a partition of timber and cloth. But it gives Alina something she's never had before, a space of her own. At night, she lies on her straw mattress, listening to the muffled sounds of the family, and she smiles. It's faint, but real. Time, however, is not sentimental. It moves forward with the same cold precision it always has. One winter, a sickness sweeps through the village. No one knows its name. They just know it starts with a cough and ends in a whisper. Alina watches as neighbors disappear. Bread lines shorten, church bells toll more often. Corin catches it, so does Isbet. Alina tends to them despite the warnings. She boils water with rosemary. She lays cool cloths on their heads. She prays, not with words, but with her hands, her breath, her presence. Isbet recovers. Corin does not. He dies before dawn, breath shallow, eyes distant. Alina holds his hand until it grows cold. She does not scream, she does not wail. She just closes his eyes and exhales the heaviest breath of her life. At the burial, the children are quiet. Isbet stands beside Alina, her face a mask of disbelief. The ground is frozen. The priest speaks quickly. And just like that, the sun rises on a world without Corin. The house is quieter after. Not silent. There are still children, still chores, but the absence is a loud thing. Alina moves through the days with a new slowness, not from age, but from weight. She dreams more often now, of fields in spring, of her brothers long gone, of the first time she ever held Corin, slick and screaming, a bundle of potential and fear. Sometimes she dreams of herself, young again, walking barefoot through dew-covered grass. No name, no title, just a girl with dirt on her toes and questions in her head. One morning, she wakes and her hands won't stop shaking. Her breath feels short. The firewood is damp and she can't get the flame to catch. She sits down on the stool beside the hearth and stares into the cold ash. Isbeth finds her there an hour later, still and pale. She lives through it, but only just. After that, Alina no longer fetches water or tends the garden. She stays inside, wrapped in layers, sipping broth, watching the light change on the walls. The children visit her often. Alira brings flowers. The youngest draws pictures with charcoal on scraps of cloth. She smiles when she can. She listens more than she speaks. The village continues without her. A new lord arrives. The harvest is thin. Another baby is born, this time in the neighboring house. And Alina, quiet and fading, watches it all from her chair. One evening, as the sky turns the color of old ash, she asks Isbeth to open the window. The air is cold but clean. She closes her eyes and lets it in. She does not speak, does not announce. She simply goes. And when the family finds her, she is still smiling. There is no monument, no song, just a woman buried beside her son beneath the yew tree. But in the hearts of those she left behind, she is something more. She is the thread that held them together, the voice that hummed through storms, the quiet strength that never asked for credit. Her life was not easy, it was not fair, but it was hers, and she lived it fully. Spring comes slowly that year. The ground, once stiff with frost, softens under timid rain. Buds begin to appear along the edges of the yew tree behind the house, where Alina now rests, quiet and deep beneath the soil. Alira, now nearly 12, visits the tree every morning. Sometimes she speaks to it, sometimes she doesn't. She just sits, tracing her fingers through the grass, humming a tune her grandmother used to sing while stirring stew. No one else remembers the melody, but she does. The house feels different without Alina. Not just emptier, quieter, in a way that doesn't always feel peaceful. Her chair remains by the hearth, unused, unmoved, as though someone will need it again soon. Isbeth doesn't remove it. Life demands continuation. So the garden must be tended, the fire must be lit, bread must be baked, even when no one feels like eating. Isbeth manages with a quiet determination she never knew she had. Her hands move before her mind catches up. Her strength is not loud, but it is stubborn. And the children, they grieve in strange, jagged ways. The youngest begins sleeping with Alina's shawl, even though it smells of smoke and old wool. The middle boy insists on eating in silence, the way Alina preferred. Alira watches it all, absorbing the sorrow like it's part of growing up. One evening, after the children are asleep and the stew has cooled, Isbeth opens the window and stares into the dark. "I don't know how to do this," she says quietly. Not to anyone in particular, not even to Alina's memory, just to the night. But she does it anyway, because that's what women do. They continue. Weeks stretch into months. The village, never one to pause for grief, moves forward. New taxes are levied. A traveling peddler brings news of another skirmish to the south. A neighbor's daughter is betrothed. And Alira, walking the same path her grandmother once did, begins to change. At 13, she is already taller than most of her peers. Her eyes, once round with curiosity, have narrowed into something older, wiser. She watches the world with a quiet intensity, always noticing what others miss. She learns quickly how to sew, how to mend, how to lie politely when the priest asks if she's been attending to her prayers. She mimics her mother's hands in the kitchen. She helps deliver the neighbor's baby without flinching. She carries herself with the kind of patience that doesn't come from reading, but from remembering. Isbeth sees it. The way the girl moves, the way she thinks before speaking. And for a fleeting moment, she fears it. Not because she doesn't trust her daughter, but because she recognizes too much of Alina in her. She knows what that kind of strength costs. One morning, Alira returns from the well with a face like stone. "There's a man," she says, setting the bucket down gently, "at the village square. He's asking about girls." Isbeth's stomach knots. She's heard this before. Men looking for wives, for servants, for help in distant towns with too few women and too many mouths to feed. She doesn't answer. Later, the priest arrives. He comes with practiced sympathy, hands clasped, voice soft. "She's at a good age," he says. "She's clever, strong. She could make a good life." What kind of life? Isbet asks, but he doesn't answer. He just shrugs, like a man offering the weather. Alira is summoned to meet the stranger. His name is Darnell. He's not old, perhaps 25, but to Alira he seems from another world entirely. He has clean boots, a trimmed beard. He speaks slowly, like someone who is used to being listened to. He says he has a farm 3 villages away. He says he's looking for a wife. He says he can offer safety, food, work, a future. Alira listens. She doesn't smile. She doesn't ask questions. She just nods, the way she's seen her mother do 1,000 times before. After he leaves, Isbet turns to her. What do you want? It's the first time she's asked. The first time the question has been offered to any woman in their family, maybe ever. Alira takes her time before answering. I want to choose, she says, and in that moment, Isbet understands exactly what Alina meant when she once whispered, we survive so they can choose. So she nods, gives her daughter her blessing, and begins the quiet, complex work of helping her decide. Darnell returns 2 days later. Alira meets him at the edge of the village, hands folded neatly, hair braided with care. I won't marry you, she says, but I'll work for you, if you give me pay and space and my own name. He blinks, surprised. Then slowly he smiles. You have courage, he says. She shrugs. I was raised by ghosts. And so a new path is carved. Alira does not leave in a bridal veil. She leaves with a bundle of clothes, a satchel of bread, and the weight of her ancestors in her spine. Isbet watches her go. She does not cry. She simply returns to the house, opens the window wide, and lights the fire again. The village talks, of course. They always do. But Alira is gone before the whispers finish forming. She steps into a life that is not easy, but chosen. She writes letters. She visits when she can. She never forgets the yew tree. Years later, when she returns for the harvest festival, her hands are calloused, her shoulders broad. She brings bread made with her own grain, her own fire, her own rules. And when she stands by Alana's grave, she whispers, I made my own way. Not loudly, not for praise, but because it is true. And in that truth, generations sleep a little easier. The yew tree behind the house is taller now. Its roots, deep and winding, have quietly wrapped around generations of memory. Birds nest in its branches, children play in its shadow, and beneath it, Alina sleeps, surrounded by soil and silence and the legacy she never asked for, but built all the same. Alira visits each time she returns. She doesn't kneel, she doesn't cry. She simply stands, hands in her pockets, and lets the wind do the talking. It always seems to know what to say. The house is still there, though time has softened its edges. The thatch has been replaced, the hearth is newer, but the bones of it remain, the same walls that watched Alina raise Corin, that watched Isbet stand alone, that heard the first cries of Alira's siblings. It breathes slower now, but it breathes. Isbet lives there still, older now, her hair long gone silver. Her movements are measured, her voice rarely raised. She tends the herbs in the window boxes. She makes stews from memory, never recipes. She carries time like a shawl, lightly but with care. The village has changed more than she has. There's a new priest, young and full of sermons that quote less fear and more hope. A healer has moved in, a woman no less, who carries vials and speaks in calm, clean words about sickness, not curses. The manor has fallen into disrepair. The Lord left years ago, and no one came to replace him. Alira's return brings murmurs, as it always does. She wears boots, not slippers, trousers, not skirts. Her hair is cut short, practical. She smells of smoke and clay and wind. She brings her own bread and doesn't ask where to sit. She chooses. Some say she's stubborn, others say strange, but no one says she's weak. This time, she's not alone. She brings with her a boy, 9 years old, curious and quiet. His name is Ren. He's not hers by birth, but by promise. She took him in after a neighbor died. No ceremony, no protest, just action. He watches the world the way she used to. Eyes full of questions, shoulders not yet burdened. He sleeps by the hearth on his first night in the house and wakes at dawn to follow Isbet into the garden. They speak little, but he listens well. Alira walks the village with him, pointing out where she used to play, where she fell once and bloodied her knee, where the baker once gave her a whole apple just for being polite. She shows him the tree and says nothing. He nods like he understands. They stay 3 days. On the second evening, Isbet tells Alira she's thinking of moving to live with her sister in the next village over. My knees hate the stairs, she says, and the roof will need mending again before next frost. Alira looks around the house, the chair, the stone walls, the fire that's seen more births and deaths than any written record. She doesn't argue. She just says, then it's time. On the last day, they gather in the small room. Alira, Ren, Isbet, and the warmth of 1,000 moments pressed between the stones. They eat simple stew. They speak of ordinary things. Ren asks quietly, "Who planted the tree?" Isbet smiles. "No one. It was always there." But Alira shakes her head. "No," she says softly. "It grew because something stayed." That night, they pack. Alira takes a few things: the wooden spoon with the crack down its handle, a faded shawl, one of the carved bowls. She doesn't need much else. The rest is left behind, not as waste, but as memory. Isbet leaves with only a satchel and a smile. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. They lock the door one last time, not because they think it will keep anyone out, but because it's what you do when you've said goodbye properly. The village watches them go, 3 generations walking away from the past, not abandoning it, but placing it down gently so they can carry something new. Alira settles in the next valley, where the soil is better and the air smells of pine. She builds a home from stone and wood with help from neighbors and Ren's eager hands. She plants herbs in a window box. She hangs the spoon above the hearth. Ren goes to the village school. He learns to read, to write, to ask why. And Alira, despite never having gone herself, teaches him to think slowly, to speak carefully, and to leave space for silence. They get a goat. It's grumpy and eats the laundry. But it makes Ren laugh, and Alira lets it stay. Sometimes she catches herself staring at the hills, eyes tracing the way back home, not out of longing, but out of habit. A map she knows so well she could walk it in the dark. She writes letters to Isbet, simple ones. The weather is turning. The roof held through the storm. Ren made bread today, and it was terrible. We ate it anyway. Isbet writes back, her handwriting thin but steady. That's how you know he'll be fine. He fed you. Seasons shift again. Ren grows taller, the goat grows fatter, and Alira, still quiet, still solid, becomes the woman people go to when they're lost or tired or need a place to sit. They call her stubborn, they call her strong, they call her kind. They do not call her anyone's wife, and she is fine with that. Because in the quiet moments when the fire burns low and the wind dances through the cracks, she hears the voice of Alina. Not words, not ghosts, just presence. And she knows. She has not broken the chain. She has bent it into something better, something that can hold without cutting. It is early autumn when the first letter arrives. The envelope is smudged with dust. The handwriting is unfamiliar, delicate but unsure. Ren brings it in from the post table, holding it like something fragile, sacred. Alira turns it over slowly, no return name, just her own, spelled correctly, which already feels like a miracle. She opens it by the fire, careful not to tear the paper. Inside, 3 short paragraphs, each one careful, deliberate, as if written by someone who wasn't sure they had the right to speak but needed to anyway. The girl's name is Marin. She writes from a neighboring village 2 valleys over. She says she heard about Alira, that she heard of a woman who lived alone, who took in a boy without question, who refused to marry out of duty, who made bread, even if badly. She says she wants to come. Alira reads the letter twice, then a 3rd time, then sets it down. She doesn't answer right away. It's not that she's surprised. It's that she remembers what it feels like to ask for a future you're not even sure exists, to hope for something you've never seen with your own eyes. The next morning, she writes back. Her response is short. You may come. Bring only what you want, not what you think you must. A week later, Marin arrives, barefoot, clutching a basket with 2 dresses and a jar of honey. Her face is pinched with travel, her voice barely above a whisper. Ren meets her at the gate, offers her bread. It's better now. He's improved. Alira watches them from the window. She sees the girl's posture, the way she flinches at noise, the way her eyes scan the corners of the room like they're waiting to hurt her. Alira recognizes it all. She shows Marin the small guest room. It's sparse, but warm. She offers her tea. Then silence. Then time. Marin takes all 3. The first few days, they don't speak much. Ren does most of the talking. About the goat, about the market, about the fact that he once tried to build a kite, but it wouldn't fly because he forgot wind was a thing. Marin listens. Then one night, she laughs. Just once. Sharp. Sudden. Surprised by her own sound. Alira smiles from across the room, but doesn't say anything. She just adds another log to the fire and lets the heat do its work. It takes weeks, but Marin begins to settle. She helps in the garden, learns how to knead dough, trims her hair short like Alira's, walks with more weight in her heels and less in her shoulders. She never talks about where she came from. She doesn't have to. Instead, she learns how to be here. The three of them form something. Not a family, exactly. Not in the way priests define it, but something that holds. A shape made of choice, not blood. Bound by quietness, not law. Word spreads. Another girl writes, then another. A boy too, barely 15, kicked out of his home for asking the wrong questions about the wrong gods. They come in pairs or alone, sometimes with bags, sometimes with nothing but a name. Alira takes them all. She doesn't ask for stories, doesn't give conditions, just hands them a cup of tea and a chore and a soft place to sleep. They plant more herbs, build another room, patch the roof again, then again. Ren draws a map on the wall with charcoal, each name, each year, each person who came and stayed, even just for a season. He calls it the quiet because that's what they all say when asked why they stayed. It's quiet here, they say, but they don't mean silent, they mean safe. Years pass like pages. Some who come stay, some move on, stronger, softer, carrying a piece of the quiet with them. Alira sees each one off with the same nod, the same half smile. She doesn't ask them to write, but some do. One letter comes from a girl now running her own bakery 2 towns over. Another from a boy who's teaching letters to children in a village where no one had ever read a book before. Each word is a thread tying the quiet to the wider world. And slowly, the world begins to notice. A woman arrives one morning with a satchel full of ink and questions. She says she's a scholar. She wants to write about this place, about the way it spreads without banners, about the way it heals without doctors, about the way it says no without shouting. Alira listens, then says, "You can stay, but you work like the rest of us." The scholar ends up learning how to thatch a roof. She writes her pages at night by firelight with ink-stained fingers and hay in her hair. When she finally leaves, she hugs Alira, awkward, sudden, grateful. Months later, copies of the manuscript arrive. Not many, just enough. The title reads, "The Women Who Chose Silence and Found Strength." Alira doesn't read it, but she places it on the shelf next to the bread bowl with the crack and the shawl with the smoke smell that never quite faded. One day, she finds Ren sitting under the tree, now as tall as Alina's ever was. He's taller now, voice lower, shoulders broader. He's nearly grown. He looks at her and asks, "Will it always be this way?" She thinks, then says, "I hope not. But if it isn't," she adds, "you'll know how to make it again." He nods, not like a child, but like someone who's starting to understand how much can be said with just that. The tree rustles above them. The wind carries nothing urgent. Alira leans back on her hands. The sun is low, the shadows long. She closes her eyes, and somewhere far down in the roots of that tree, a woman who never asked for legacy but built one anyway rests quietly, knowing the world has shifted, even just a little. The tree stands tall through another winter. Snow clings to its branches like lace, quiet and heavy. Beneath its roots, time keeps its slow, steady rhythm. No rush, no end. Inside the house, the fire burns low. Ren adds another log, then sits back with a satisfied sigh. He's taller now than Alira. His voice carries weight when he speaks, though he still chooses silence most days. He works the land, repairs the roof without being asked, bakes bread that doesn't crack like old pottery. Alira watches with a smile she doesn't always let show, the kind of smile that lives in the corners of the mouth and only appears when no one is looking. She feels the change before it arrives, not in the air or the wind, but in the letters. They come more frequently now, from farther away. From cities with paved streets and libraries with warm lanterns and rooms filled with people who speak of reform and rights and ideas like agency and inheritance, words that used to sound foreign, almost magical. Now they feel possible. One letter is from a girl who stayed one winter and left in the spring with dirt still under her nails. She writes, "I stood up in front of a room full of men. I told them I had a name. They laughed, but not all of them." Another writes from a coastal town, "They gave me a broom. I brought my own pen. Now I write their ledgers and I don't ask for permission." Alira reads these letters aloud by firelight. Not every night. Just when the house feels still and the wind needs company. Others gather to listen. Some nod, some cry, some simply stare into the flames and whisper, "Maybe me." She doesn't tell them what to do. That was never her way. She just keeps the door open. Years fold into each other like linen tucked into drawers. The house expands, not with rooms, but with people. Sometimes there are 7, sometimes 15. No one counts officially. They just make more soup. One spring morning, Marin, older now, hair streaked with gray, plants a second tree beside the first. For shade, she says. Alira smiles but says nothing. She understands. Shade is a luxury for those who once only knew exposure. That summer, a stranger arrives. She's quiet, a bit guarded, with eyes like flint. She doesn't ask for shelter, she asks for work. Alira shows her to the tools. For days, the woman doesn't speak unless spoken to. She fixes a leak in the barn roof, stacks wood so precisely it looks like a painting, sleeps under the stars instead of inside. One night, as they're peeling root vegetables by the hearth, the woman says, "Where I came from, I was nothing." Alira doesn't respond immediately. She lets the silence breathe first, then says, "You're something here." The woman doesn't cry, but her hands still for a long time. By the end of the week, she moves inside. Ren begins teaching letters to the younger ones. They gather around the table with smudged fingers and loud opinions. They write their names over and over. Some try poetry. Others draw maps of what their world might look like if they were in charge. One girl draws a castle, but instead of towers and moats, it has herb gardens, fire pits, and rows of beds. A place where no one gets locked in, she explains. Alira pins it to the wall. Visitors come more often now. Some bring food, others bring books. A few just sit and listen. One woman brings a fiddle and plays by the fire until everyone forgets what sorrow sounds like. The community that was once a secret becomes something else. Not loud, but undeniable. People begin calling it the quiet house. They speak of it in market stalls and at harvest fairs, usually in whispers, sometimes in awe. No one quite knows who started it. No one needs to. One autumn, a new girl arrives. She's 10, or maybe 9. She doesn't speak, not even when offered food or stories or warmth. Alira doesn't push, just offers her the same 3 things everyone else got: a blanket, a bowl, and space. The girl takes them all, then curls beside the fire and sleeps for 14 hours. When she wakes, she watches. Not like a child, but like someone gathering evidence. She eats slowly, starts following Marin around the garden, mimics Ren as he reads aloud. One evening, as the sun slips behind the hills, the girl climbs into Alira's lap and says her name. Just that. No explanation, no backstory. Alira wraps her arms around the child and says, "Welcome." That night, she dreams of Alina again, not a ghost, just a presence. Hands brushing breadcrumbs from a table, a soft hum in the background, a face lined not with pain, but with purpose. She wakes with tears on her cheeks, not from grief, from something softer, satisfaction, maybe, legacy without the ceremony. Later, she stands beneath the tree, the original one, the one that stood witness to it all. She presses her hand to the bark. "It's not quiet anymore," she whispers, then smiles. "Good," and walks back inside where the soup is simmering, where the children are laughing, where the world, against all odds, is still being rebuilt, one small, stubborn, beautiful moment at a time. The fire is older now. It doesn't burn quite as hot, and it takes longer to catch, but it still lights. Alira rises earlier these days, not because she must, but because the quiet of dawn has become her favorite time, before the chores, before the talking, when the house is asleep and the world hasn't yet demanded anything. She walks the path between the trees barefoot, as she always has. The second tree, Marin's tree, is growing quickly, tall and assured. The yew, though older, still stands, bent but not broken, much like the women who once knelt under its shade. The soil around it is thick with roots and stories. She feels it in her steps. She's not sick. Not in the way people mean when they say sick, but she feels her strength shifting, not fading, just settling, like a wave returning to sea. She spends more time in the chair now, not from weakness, from watching, from letting others step forward. Ren is nearly 20. He's no longer the boy who once asked if trees remember. He's the one others look to when the roof needs fixing, when the goat goes missing, when the bread overbakes and someone needs to laugh about it. He doesn't live in the house anymore. He built a small cottage near the edge of the field. Still close, but his own. He visits daily, brings herbs, apples, questions. "Do you think it'll last?" he asks one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor like he used to as a child. Alira doesn't answer right away. She watches the fire, listens to the crackle, lets the silence shape her reply. If it doesn't, she says, someone will build it again. That night, she dreams of walls, not stone, not wood, but hands. Linked together, open, holding. A house made entirely of touch. No doors, just welcome. The following week, the scholar returns, the one with the ink-stained fingers. Older now, her robes worn at the edges, her eyes sharper than ever. She comes with questions, always, but also with a surprise. She unrolls a scroll, official, ornate, tied in red ribbon. The Quiet House, she reads aloud, is hereby recognized as an institution of communal heritage, protected, respected, independent. Alira raises one brow. We're a heritage now? The scholar laughs. Apparently, yes. They tack the scroll to the wall next to the map of names. No one salutes it, but a few bow their heads. Soon after, visitors arrive in greater numbers. Some just want to look, to understand. A few bring money. Alira tells them to leave it on the table and fetch a broom. One woman, soft-spoken, dressed in fine wool, asks if she can write about them in a book of modern civil forms of resistance. Alira shrugs. If you must. They include a sketch of her in the final chapter. She's sitting on the front steps, sun in her eyes, one hand shielding her face, the other holding a spoon. The caption reads, "She didn't start a revolution. She just never left the door locked." Alira never sees the book, but she hears people talk about it in the garden. Seasons roll on. Leaves change. The second tree drops its first round of heavy fruit. They bake pies from it. The youngest child, barely 6, insists on naming it Victory Pie. No one argues. Marin grows slower too. She walks with a stick now. Still tends the herbs, still mutters at weeds, but lets others carry the baskets. One morning, she sits beside Alira by the fire, both of them wrapped in layers, sipping broth. You ever think of leaving? Marin asks. Once, Alira says, long time ago. And, Alira smiles, I couldn't find anywhere better. They sit in silence a while. Then Marin chuckles. I told that tree it would outlive me. Now I'm not so sure. Alira glances toward the window. The tree stands strong, but so does Marin. That spring, a letter arrives from a city council far to the east. They want to replicate the Quiet House, build their own version, train people in its methods. Alira pens a short response. There is no method. Just listen, then stay. She adds, as a postscript, don't try to fix people, let them rest. The following month, a stranger comes asking for Alina, says he read about her, wants to know more. Alira doesn't tell him everything, only that she once lived in a room with one bed, one goat, and one dream, to survive. And did she? He asks. Alira nods. She did more than that. Ren plants a third tree that summer, not near the others, but out by his own house. For what's next, he says. Alira doesn't ask what that means. She already knows. Later that evening, Ren's partner arrives, a man soft-spoken, kind, nervous around goats. They met at a harvest exchange 2 villages over. He fits in quickly, learns to make stew, makes Ren laugh, sleeps with the window open, even in winter. Alira doesn't comment, just adds another seat at the table. The house continues. Babies are born, names are added to the map, stories are told and retold, growing wilder with each telling. One child insists Alina had wings. Another swears Alira once fought off a tax collector with a loaf of stale bread. Alira doesn't correct them. Legends are how people remember truths too big for facts. And then, one summer, she doesn't wake up. No pain, no panic, just stillness. Marin finds her in the chair. Hands folded, face soft, the fire still warm beside her. They bury her beneath the yew tree. No marker, just a circle of stones. The way she wanted. Ren says a few words. So does Marin. Others too, but most just stand and let the wind speak. The house doesn't collapse, it breathes in and keeps going. The children still run, the bread still burns sometimes, the door still never locks, and the tree, tall and wild, bends just slightly in the breeze like it's listening. Because maybe it is. It begins as it always does with a girl at the gate. She is young, thin, shoulders drawn up like armor, clothes too large, voice too small. No one asks her age. It doesn't matter. What matters is that she's here. She doesn't knock, just stands there. One hand clutching a satchel that looks older than she is, the other hand clenched in a fist she hasn't yet learned to open. A boy spots her from the garden. He runs to fetch someone. The door opens. A woman steps out. Not Alira, not Marin, not Ren. Someone newer, younger, but with the same steadiness in her spine. She smiles gently. You hungry? The girl nods. Then come on. That's all it takes. Inside, the house is alive. The floors creak like always, the fire crackles, laughter spills out from somewhere near the kitchen. Someone is humming a tune that no one remembers the name of. The girl is handed a bowl, a blanket, a chair by the fire. No questions. Not yet. Not ever, if she doesn't want them. She watches the others, a tall teen reading out loud from a book with missing pages, two women debating the best way to patch a roof, a baby on someone's hip, gurgling in time with the clink of spoons against bowls. She eats, slowly, then faster. Later that night, she's shown a bed. It smells of lavender and ash. She doesn't speak, just curls up and listens, to the wind, to the house, to her own heartbeat softening in the safety of linen. Outside, the trees rustle. There are 4 now. The yew is the largest, still standing though the middle has begun to hollow. The second Marin's leans protectively beside it, still strong. Wren's tree is behind his cottage, now part of a small orchard. And the fourth? The fourth tree is young, barely taller than a child. It was planted last year after Marin passed quietly in her sleep, curled by the fire with a cup still warm in her lap. They planted it in her honor, and they joke now that its stubborn bend to the left is exactly her. The orchard has grown, the garden too. There's a full workshop now, with tools passed down and improved. There's even a new library, 2 shelves nailed together under the rafters, holding donated books with dog-eared pages and handwritten notes in the margins. One of the oldest books has Alira's name inside the front cover. Just that. No date, no title, just property of no one. But she read it twice. Visitors still come, fewer than before. But those who arrive come with purpose. They don't come for rescue anymore. They come for remembrance, for learning, to build their own. A woman in her 40s spends a week here each spring. She listens more than she speaks, then returns home to her small town and opens her own house. Same rules, same fire, same welcome. A boy from the coast sends letters every month. He's building a school, he says, not one for lessons, but one for listening. Sometimes, he writes, a place to sit safely is the only education we need. Children born here grow into teens, then adults. Some stay, some leave, but they all know how to build a fire, how to hold space, how to say, you're safe now, and mean it. The map on the wall is almost full. Names, dates, notes in the margins. Stayed 3 months, learned how to laugh again. Brought a goat stayed, I didn't. Was silent for 12 days, then I sang. No one erases anything, even the ones who left angry, even the ones who never said goodbye. History, they say, belongs to all of us, not just the parts that make sense. In the evenings, the new caretakers gather by the fire, different faces now, but the same feeling. Someone always brings tea, someone always brings a question. Do you think they'd be proud of us? It's asked every so often, not from insecurity, but from reverence. Someone always answers the same way. They'd be proud we didn't ask for permission. Outside, the wind shifts through the orchard. The leaves murmur, the roots settle, the house remains. Not perfect, not polished, not a monument, just real, lived in, loved. Some days the past feels like a shadow, other days like a lantern, but always it walks beside them. The girl, new, quiet, still learning the shape of her own voice, sits under the tree on her 7th morning. She traces the bark with a finger. A boy joins her. Not much older, hands her a plum from Marin's tree. They don't speak, they don't need to. The tree creaks, a door opens, a fire is lit, and the world once again begins to heal, one safe, stubborn breath at a time. The seasons, as ever, do not ask for permission. Spring rains return, soaking the soil, feeding the roots of all 4 trees that stand watch over the house like sentinels. Blossoms open in quiet bursts, unnoticed until someone steps outside with bread crusts in their pocket and wonder in their chest. The girl at the gate, now named Kiva, stays. Not forever, just long enough. Long enough to sleep without bracing. Long enough to laugh mid-bite. Long enough to plant something and see it sprout. She learns to patch roofs, to name herbs, to braid rope. But more than that, she learns to stay in a room without shrinking. One day she asks, was there really a woman named Alina? She's told yes, but there are no paintings, she says. She never sat still long enough, someone replies. Kiva starts sketching. She draws the house, the trees, the shoes lined up by the door. The goat, which is now 2 goats and 1 very bold chicken. She hangs the drawings above the hearth, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. The house is full again, as full as it ever was. Beds are shared, porridge is stretched, the tea always lasts. No one asks how, it just does. A woman named Sarah arrives in midsummer. She's older, perhaps 40, but carries herself like someone who's still waiting to be asked in. She doesn't speak for 3 days, not even when greeted, not even when handed a spoon. On the fourth day, she walks into the garden and begins pulling weeds. By dusk, she's leading the youngest children in planting a row of carrots. By winter, she's reading aloud by the fire in a voice that wraps around the room like wool. She never explains what brought her here. No one asks. But one evening, when the wind is howling, she runs her fingers over the names on the wall and says softly, "This should be a book." So they make one. It starts simple. Names, dates, memories. Then someone adds drawings, another adds recipes, then a poem, then a lullaby. By the end of the year, it's thick, bound in cloth, heavy with stories that no history would think to ask for, but that matter all the same. They call it The House That Remained. Copies are made, passed quietly to travelers, scholars, school teachers. One ends up in a city archive, another on a pirate ship, allegedly. A third is read aloud in a courtroom where a girl is fighting for her right to keep her own name. The story grows, but the house does not swell with pride. It just continues. Kiva eventually leaves. She walks the path barefoot like so many before her, a small pack on her back and ink on her fingers. Before she goes, she pins a note to the tree. "Thank you for not fixing me, just feeding me." Years pass. People still come. But more now are returning. Those who once left for cities, for fields, for oceans come back. Not broken, not lost, just ready. They come back with ideas, with seeds, with songs. They help build a new wing, just one room wider, not grand, not flashy, just room enough for more sleeping mats, more space by the fire. There's no founder's portrait, no anthem, no brand, only a broom beside the door. A sign above it reads, "If you're here, you're part of it." Some try to define what it is, a lifestyle, a philosophy, a rebellion. They debate over bowls of stew. One girl, barely 12, says, "It's a place where you get to start the story over and no one says you're late." Everyone agrees, even the stew. One autumn, they hold a gathering, not a festival, not quite a ceremony, just an invitation. Come if you have once slept here, cried here, or laughed hard enough to forget the storm outside. Dozens arrive, some with children of their own, others with gray in their hair. They bring gifts, wildflower seeds, scarves, new words in old dialects. They take turns by the fire, telling stories, finishing each other's memories. At one point, someone stands and raises a hand. "What do we do when the world forgets again?" she asks. An old voice answers from the back. "Then we remember louder." That night, they dance, to fiddles, to pots being banged with spoons, to nothing at all. The next morning, the house is quiet again, not empty, just resting. The girl who once sketched the hearth now teaches drawing in 3 villages. The baby who once teethed on a soup ladle is old enough to walk goats, plural. The tree, the yew, still stands. The hollow in its center is deeper, but no one fears it. They leave little notes in there, bits of ribbon, smooth stones, the kindling of memory. One winter morning, a child asks, "Who was the first?" The answer, as always, is a breath. Then someone says her name was Elina. She was tired, but she stayed. And someone else adds, "And she taught the rest of us how." The house creaks in the wind, the goats bleat, someone burns the bread, no one is mad. They eat it anyway, because that's the rule, really, the only one. You are welcome, as you are. Stay if you need, go if you must, return if you can. And in this small, stubborn place, with its fire, its soup, and its endless door, the story continues. Not loudly, but forever. The storm rolls in just before dusk. Not a violent one, not the kind that tears roofs or splits trees, just a long, soaking, steady rain. The kind that speaks to the soil in old languages. The kind that makes the house feel like a ship afloat in time. Inside, the fire hums low. A pot bubbles on the hearth full of root vegetables and barley, and the kind of seasoning you can't name but recognize by smell. A boy named Tal sits near the window. He's new, 12 maybe, ran from somewhere with a name he won't say. Arrived with mud on his shoes and rage behind his eyes. He hasn't spoken much, just watches, waits. Tonight, though, he leans forward, eyes wide. "Why don't you ever lock the door?" he asks. The question lands like a feather, not heavy, but heard. An older girl across the room answers without looking up from her knitting, "Because someone didn't lock it for us." Another chimes in, "Because closed doors are where bad stories begin." Tal nods. He doesn't fully understand, but he will. They feed him 2 bowls of stew. He eats both without shame. then leans back and listens as the stories begin. Old ones, half true, passed down like heirlooms. They talk of Alina, of Corin, of Isbet and Alira, of ghosts who whispered wisdom and trees that never stopped listening. Someone retells the tale of the bread that cracked a soldier's tooth. Everyone laughs, even though they've heard it dozens of times. Outside, the rain continues. Not cruel, just persistent. The yew tree drinks deeply, the soil softens, and in the attic, now more of a library than a storage room, Mira, the current keeper, scribbles into a journal with a stub of pencil. She doesn't write for fame, or clarity, or proof. She writes because the house itself seems to ask for memory. Her handwriting is crooked, her thoughts sometimes unfinished, but the pages breathe. Tal came today, still angry, ate fast, eyes like flint, but he stayed through the story. I think that's a beginning. She flips to another page. The fourth tree is growing sideways, like it's reaching, like it wants to see something more. In the mornings, Mira tends to the garden. She speaks to the plants, not out of ritual, but because no one told her not to. She pulls weeds and tells them thank you. Plants seedlings and whispers, let's try again. Every Thursday, she teaches 3 younger kids to make ink. It stains everything, fingers, elbows, the floor. They don't mind. There are ink smudges now on the stair rail, on the kitchen table, on the wall beside the door. One child jokes, this is how we make the house remember us. He's right. Down in the common room, someone's making music. Not a song, just sound. Plucking at a stringed instrument left behind by a wanderer named Tom, who once traded it for 2 nights of soup and silence. It's slightly out of tune, but no one minds. A woman stands in the doorway listening. Her name is Ira. She hasn't lived here long, but already the shadows under her eyes have begun to fade. She steps inside slowly and asks, can I learn? The music stops, then starts again, slower. 1 string at a time. A space is made for her hands. This is how it happens. Not all at once, not with announcements, just a question, a nod, a place to sit. The map on the wall is now too full for ink. So they start using thread, colored lines connecting names, showing where people went, who they met, what they built. It looks like a spider web, or a constellation, or a miracle. No one can quite say which. In one corner of the house, a little boy draws on the floor with chalk. When asked what he's making, he says, it's a spell to keep the house kind. They don't correct him. One evening during dinner, someone new asks, is this a commune, a refuge, a school? The answer is a shrug. Then a smile. It's a house. And that's all it needs to be. Because in this house, no one is expected to explain their silence. Everyone learns to wash their own bowl. Tears are treated like rain, expected, necessary, temporary. Laughter is shared like bread, messy and loud and often unexpected. And every corner, every crack holds a piece of someone who once needed more than the world was offering. Tal eventually finds his voice. Not all at once, not in speeches. He starts by reading out loud, then helping in the garden, then teaching a younger boy how to mend a boot. One day, someone calls him brother, and he doesn't flinch. That night, he stays up late and adds his name to the map. Not in ink, but with a piece of thread the color of firelight. The rain stops by morning. The yard is soft, the trees shimmer, the goats are wet and unimpressed. The fire is coaxed back to life. Bread is made. A girl burns hers and laughs like it's a badge of honor. Another day begins, and through it all, the door remains open. Not wide, just enough. Enough to say you can come in, you can belong, and you don't have to earn it. The storm rolls in just before dusk. Not a violent one, not the kind that tears roofs or splits trees, just a long, soaking, steady rain. The kind that speaks to the soil in old languages. The kind that makes the house feel like a ship afloat in time. Inside, the fire hums low. A pot bubbles on the hearth, full of root vegetables and barley, and the kind of seasoning you can't name but recognize by smell. A boy named Tal sits near the window. He's new, 12 maybe. Ran from somewhere with a name he won't say. Arrived with mud on his shoes and rage behind his eyes. He hasn't spoken much, just watches, waits. Tonight, though, he leans forward, eyes wide. Why don't you ever lock the door, he asks. The question lands like a feather, not heavy, but heard. An older girl across the room answers without looking up from her knitting. Because someone didn't lock it for us. Another chimes in. Because closed doors are where bad stories begin. Tal nods. He doesn't fully understand, but he will. They feed him 2 bowls of stew. He eats both without shame. then leans back and listens as the stories begin, old ones, half true, passed down like heirlooms. They talk of Alina, of Corin, of Yisbet and Alira, of ghosts who whispered wisdom and trees that never stopped listening. Someone retells the tale of the bread that cracked a soldier's tooth. Everyone laughs, even though they've heard it dozens of times. Outside, the rain continues. Not cruel, just persistent. The yew tree drinks deeply, the soil softens, and in the attic, now more of a library than a storage room, Mira, the current keeper, scribbles into a journal with a stub of pencil. She doesn't write for fame, or clarity, or proof. She writes because the house itself seems to ask for memory. Her handwriting is crooked, her thoughts sometimes unfinished, but the pages breathe. Tal came today, still angry, ate fast, eyes like flint, but he stayed through the story. I think that's a beginning. She flips to another page. The fourth tree is growing sideways, like it's reaching, like it wants to see something more. In the mornings, Mira tends to the garden. She speaks to the plants, not out of ritual, but because no one told her not to. She pulls weeds and tells them thank you. Plants seedlings and whispers, let's try again. Every Thursday, she teaches 3 younger kids to make ink. It stains everything. Fingers, elbows, the floor. They don't mind. There are ink smudges now on the stair rail, on the kitchen table, on the wall beside the door. One child jokes, "This is how we make the house remember us." He's right. Down in the common room, someone's making music. Not a song, just sound. Plucking at a stringed instrument left behind by a wanderer named Tom, who once traded it for 2 nights of soup and silence. It's slightly out of tune, but no one minds. A woman stands in the doorway, listening. Her name is Ira. She hasn't lived here long, but already the shadows under her eyes have begun to fade. She steps inside slowly and asks, "Can I learn?" The music stops, then starts again, slower. 1 string at a time. A space is made for her hands. This is how it happens, not all at once, not with announcements. Just a question, a nod, a place to sit. The map on the wall is now too full for ink, so they start using thread, colored lines, connecting names, showing where people went, who they met, what they built. It looks like a spider web or a constellation or a miracle. No one can quite say which. In one corner of the house, a little boy draws on the floor with chalk. When asked what he's making, he says, "It's a spell to keep the house kind." They don't correct him. One evening during dinner, someone new asks, "Is this a commune, a refuge, a school?" The answer is a shrug, then a smile. It's a house. And that's all it needs to be, because in this house, no one is expected to explain their silence. Everyone learns to wash their own bowl. Tears are treated like rain, expected, necessary, temporary. Laughter is shared like bread, messy and loud and often unexpected. And every corner, every crack holds a piece of someone who once needed more than the world was offering. Tal eventually finds his voice. Not all at once, not in speeches. He starts by reading out loud, then helping in the garden, then teaching a younger boy how to mend a boot. One day, someone calls him brother, and he doesn't flinch. That night, he stays up late and adds his name to the map. Not in ink, but with a piece of thread the color of firelight. The rain stops by morning. The yard is soft. The trees shimmer. The goats are wet and unimpressed. The fire is coaxed back to life. Bread is made. A girl burns hers and laughs like it's a badge of honor. Another day begins, and through it all, the door remains open, not wide, just enough. Enough to say, you can come in, you can belong, and you don't have to earn it. The roof leaks again, not in a catastrophic way, just a slow, polite drip over the pantry that nobody notices until someone finds their socks soggy while reaching for flour. Mira sighs. It's the corner beam again. Tal appears behind her, a hammer in hand before she's even finished the sentence. "3rd time this year. Think it's testing us." Mira smirks. "It'll lose." By midday, the roof is patched. Again. The socks are drying by the fire, stuffed with herbs to chase off the damp smell. Someone tapes a note to the pantry. "Bring boots. Trust nothing." Outside, the 4th tree leans further toward the sun, as if whispering to the clouds. It's now tall enough to be climbed, and several children have decided its branches are their preferred classroom. The new teacher, Saren, a recent arrival with ink-stained fingertips and a quiet voice, has stopped trying to bring them inside. She sits beneath the tree with a stack of slates and simply reads until someone listens. One child, 7 years old, interrupts every story to ask, "Did it really happen like that?" Saren always answers the same way. It happened the way someone remembers it. This seems to satisfy everyone. In early spring, they start building another room, not because they need it urgently, but because a space that isn't growing is one step closer to forgetting how to stretch. They debate what the room should be: a library, a weaving space, another bedroom. Eventually, they settle on all three. By the time it's done, it has a skylight, mismatched shelves, and a wall where everyone is invited to leave a word, just one, in charcoal, in chalk, in whatever language their bones understand best. Words appear like moss after rain. Begin. Safe. Enough. Again. Stay. Listen. Louder. No one paints over them. The wall becomes a map of things once unspeakable, now spoken. That summer, an old woman arrives. Her name is Ilara. She walks with a cane and introduces herself by saying, "I brought seeds." No one asks why. She's given the warmest bed, the softest chair, and a garden plot that's never taken root before. The soil resists at first, but Ilara hums when she digs. She speaks to the worms. She thanks the rain, and by mid-season, her garden explodes in a riot of green. She grows basil the size of dinner plates, tomatoes that seem to blush when picked. Children begin sneaking into her garden not to steal, but to smell. She teaches them gently, with stories disguised as instructions. If the leaves droop, it's not sadness, just thirst. You can fix thirst. And every plant grows sideways a little when it's reaching for light. That's not wrong. That's strategy. At night, she sleeps with a bundle of thyme under her pillow. Says it keeps the nightmares polite. One evening, she tells Mira, "I knew Elena." Mira stills. "I was a child," Ilara adds. "She scared me, like thunder does. Not because it's cruel, because it reminds you how small you are." They don't speak for a moment, then Ilara chuckles. "I still have the scar from the soup ladle she whacked me with. I was being loud. She was grieving. Neither of us apologized." Mira laughs so hard she cries. Ilara stays for 5 months, then leaves, just after the first frost, wrapped in a scarf, knitted by Lena, and a pouch of seeds from every child who'd followed her around the garden. No one says goodbye, just right when the thyme blooms. The rhythm of the house continues. Some nights are quiet, some are loud. Once, someone accidentally sets fire to the oven mitts. The fire is out in seconds. The laughter lasts an hour. A visiting baker donates 10 loaves of rye. The children name each one, then eat them all before the names can be memorized. Someone hangs a sign above the firewood. "We have enough, but only if we share it." When the snow returns, it brings silence, not the cold silence of dread, the soft hush of a story settling into its next chapter. Mira finds herself looking out the window more often, watching people move through the yard, the kitchen, the day, not with ownership, with awe. This place is not hers, never was. It belongs to every voice that's passed through its walls and left a word behind. Tal is nearly grown now. He's carving furniture, fixing beams, laughing more. Lena teaches a class on storytelling. She lets the children tell complete nonsense, tales about invisible goats and talking turnips, then gently weaves truth into the endings. They adore her. Saren has started binding books, tiny ones, pocket-sized stories with wide margins so new ones can be added later. She gives one to every guest who leaves. And each night before she sleeps, Mira adds one line to the book she's still writing, the one that doesn't have an ending yet. Tonight's line reads, "We are still here. We are still building. We are still listening." Outside, the trees don't need to speak. The door still creaks open, the fire still waits, and the story, as always, continues. The frost comes early this year, tracing lace on the windows before anyone expects it. The mornings are slow to start, breath blooming in the air above tea mugs and sleepy fires. Mira wakes earlier now, not because she must, but because the silence feels different in winter. It wraps tighter, holds longer, carries stories in its hush. In the barn, the goats grumble under thick blankets. One of them, named Trouble for good reason, has taken to following Lena around like an opinion she didn't ask for. She doesn't mind, calls him boss, and pretends she works for him. The children think it's hilarious. Outside, the fourth tree has begun to lean so far they've tied a ribbon to its trunk to mark its path. Not because they're worried, because they're proud. Growing sideways is still growing, Tal says. They've built a second bench beside it. Rough wood, sturdy legs, a soft dip in the middle. It's the new favorite spot to read or argue or eat something hot. A woman named Dina arrives one morning with a suitcase full of broken violins and no explanation. She sets up in the back room, spends hours polishing, tuning, cursing softly when strings snap. No one asks where she came from. Someone just brings her stew and a warm scarf. Weeks later, music drifts down the hall, not perfect, but reaching. By spring, Dina's teaching others. Even the goats, it seems, are listening. That season, something unusual happens. A man comes, not lost, not broken, not looking for safety. He comes with questions. I want to build one, he says, like this, in my town. The room is quiet for a moment, then Mira nods. Good, he blinks. Don't you want to know where? No. How? Same way we did, slowly, with soup. He laughs. There's no handbook? No, just a broom and bread and a door that stays open even when it hurts. They give him what they can, seeds, stories, a small handmade book titled What We Know But Never Say. When he leaves, a child ties a thread around his wrist. For luck, she says. He promises to send a map when the first brick is laid. Weeks pass, then a letter arrives. Inside is a drawing, a gate half open under a tree. One word written below, begin. There are now 6 such drawings tacked to the hallway wall. 6 homes, 6 doors, 6 beginnings. No one calls it a movement, they just call it more. In early summer, half a storm splits the 4th tree. It happens at night. Wind howling like grief, thunder crawling across the sky. When morning comes, half the tree is lying in the yard like a fallen thought. The children cry. So does Lena, quietly, when no one is watching. Mira stands beside the broken trunk, runs her hand over the splintered wood. It was tired, she says. That afternoon they gather. They don't cut the trunk away, they build around it, add benches, paint spirals on the bark, plant herbs at its roots. It becomes a resting place, a reading nook, a reminder. They carve a phrase into its exposed heartwood. Even in breaking, we make room. Dina writes a song for the tree. The children hum it every morning. It sounds like wind finding a new path. Later that season, Ren visits. He's older now, his beard flecked with gray, his shoulders broader. He brings honey, seeds, and a baby strapped to his chest. The child's name is Elle, not short for anything, just Elle. She'll come here when she's ready, Ren says, not before. They all pass Elle around like bread. She pulls Mira's braid, babbles into Saren's book, spits up on Tal's shirt and earns a cheer for it. Mira writes that night. She doesn't know what this place is, but she smiled when she heard the fire crack. One day, a girl named Sol, barely 9, asks, "What happens if this house ever ends?" Mira pauses. Then someone builds another, wherever they are. Sol nods. "I want to build one in the stars. You will." At the year's end, they host a celebration. No ceremony, just music and candles, and a table longer than anyone remembers building. Everyone brings something. One boy brings jokes written on scraps of paper. He reads them terribly. Everyone laughs anyway. A woman sings in 3 languages at once. No one understands the words, but no one needs to. Mira brings out the first book. The one started when the house barely had 4 walls and a fire that needed coaxing. She reads aloud, "We are not trying to be history. We are trying to be here." They raise their cups to Elena, to Alira, to every door that stayed open. And then, just before the candles burn out, Tal stands, clears his throat, says, "We should plant a 5th tree." Everyone cheers. They choose a spot. Not perfect, but ready. The hole is dug by hands, young and old. The sapling is planted by Sol, who ties a star-shaped rock to its trunk. For direction, she says. As they cover the roots, someone hums Dana's tree song. Someone else adds a harmony, then another. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It is enough. And somewhere, far off in another town, a door creaks open. The 5th tree takes root slowly. It's not the tallest or the fastest growing. Its leaves are smaller. Its branches reach more horizontally than up. Some say it looks shy. Others say it looks wise. Sol, who planted it, visits daily. She talks to it about everything. Her lost mitten, her dreams of a library on the moon, her campaign to outlaw turnips in stew. She ties a ribbon around its trunk, so it remembers who loved it first. Mira watches from the window, sipping tea brewed with Alara's basil, dried and gifted in brown paper months before she wandered off to plant her next wild garden. There's no word from Alara, not yet, but a small package arrives with no note. Inside, a single bulb wrapped in time and a piece of paper that says only, "Try again, in spring." So they do. The seasons shift, as they always do. Not suddenly, just decidedly. Snow melts, paths reappear, the chickens return to their campaign of gentle rebellion. The goats reorganize their sleeping patterns. Trouble the goat is now Trouble Senior and trains a new kid named Mayhem. Dina has started building instruments from reclaimed wood. Every crack is a harmony, she says. No one corrects her. She's not wrong. One afternoon, Saren introduces a new practice, quiet hour. Not for silence, she explains, just for stillness. From noon to 1, there are no chores, no loud questions, no obligations. People sit or sleep or think or draw. At first, the children hate it. Then they start to get creative. One builds a nest of blankets and declares it a thinking cave. Another fills a jar with questions and leaves it on the mantel for later. The jar grows full quickly. Mira answers one per night. One reads, "How do you know you're not too much?" Her reply, "If a place cannot hold all of you, find one that can, or build it, or come back here." The next reads, "What if the fire goes out?" Her reply, "Then we light another, or we wait, and when the smoke clears, we find a spark." Every answer ends with, "You're still welcome." Tal begins teaching carpentry in earnest. Lena teaches stories. Sol, now 11, teaches anyone who will listen about stars. "I'm serious," she says. "We're putting a house on the moon." Ren returns with Elle, now walking, now loudly naming everything. She points to the U and calls it tall. She points to Mira and says home. No one argues. One night, Mira climbs the stairs slower than usual. Her knees don't ache, but she can feel the age of the wood more clearly now. In her attic room, she lights a candle, pulls out the first ledger, the one with Elena's name in the margin and a soup stain on page 12. She reads it from the beginning and weeps, not from grief, from awe, not at what they've built, but that it was ever possible to begin with. Downstairs, someone begins singing the tree song. Others join. By the time Mira returns to the fire, the room is glowing, not from flame, but from voices. They add verses without asking permission. For the broom that meant belonging. For the blanket that never asked why you were cold. For the name you gave yourself and finally believed. Afterward, someone suggests building a boat. To find the others, they say. Everyone laughs. But the next morning, Tal sketches plans, just in case. That spring, the bulb from Alara blooms, bright orange, stubbornly vibrant, growing sideways through the garden wall. Mira laughs so loudly it scares the goats. She picks one petal, presses it in the ledger, writes beneath it, "We never needed a path, just a beginning." Soon after, a woman arrives with a book. A real one. Published. Bound in navy cloth with gold lettering. It's titled, "The House with No Locks." She opens it to the dedication page. "To those who stayed and those who stayed alive because someone did." Mira reads it twice, then places it on the shelf beside the old ledgers. It's the only shelf in the house without dust. A month later, Kiva returns, older, taller, hair dyed the color of sky just before dusk. She walks straight to the map, pins a ribbon from a country no one can pronounce, and says, "They're starting one." She doesn't say much else, but she helps cook dinner, fix a leak, sings a lullaby to a child who isn't hers. That night, she adds to the chalk wall, "What I needed is now what I offer," and everyone nods. Later, Mira finds Sol sitting beside the fifth tree, a notebook open on her lap. "What are you writing?" Mira asks. Sol shrugs. "A plan." "For what?" "For the house on the moon." Mira chuckles. "And if the stars say no?" Sol doesn't look up, just keeps writing. "Then I'll ask louder." The rain is patient this time. It arrives without thunder, without warning, just a soft, persistent rhythm against the window panes, the kind that makes the house exhale, that pulls people toward warm corners, thick socks, and stories told in 2s and 3s. Mira finds herself watching the fire again, not with concern, just with the soft attention you give to something that's always been there and might always be if you tend it well enough. She notices something she hadn't before, a single hairline crack along the old kettle's handle. "It's earned it," she says, patting it like a shoulder. Across the room, Tal is teaching 3 younger children how to build a step stool. "Every joint is a promise," he says, tightening a rope. One of the kids, barely 7, replies, "So if I break it, am I breaking a promise?" Tal pauses, then grins. "No, just a moment, and moments can be mended." Lena writes that down in her journal. She's been keeping track of house sayings, though no one asked her to. There are now 5 volumes. Visitors still come, not many, not in floods, but they come, with letters, with maps, with quiet eyes that flick toward the fire before they say anything. Some stay for a night, others longer. One brings a bag of spoons and nothing else. Another brings a folded paper titled "Plans for a House Without Shame." They don't explain, they don't need to. The story lives in the way they unpack their silence and tuck it neatly into the corner. The goats are restless these days. Mayhem has learned how to open the barn latch and is now being politely bribed with apples to forget how. The children see this as a challenge. Mira sees it as continuity. Everything that grows learns mischief eventually, she tells Dina, who is carving a new fiddle with a handle shaped like a spiral. Dina raises a brow. You saying we've grown? I'm saying we're thriving. Outside, the fifth tree has begun to bloom for the first time. Pale blossoms like promises. Quiet, unshowy, firm. Saul hangs bells from its branches, just in case the wind forgets to sing. And it doesn't. Letters arrive weekly now, some from the original 6 homes, some from new ones, far off with names no one in the house can pronounce. One simply says, "We used your map. Our door is open." Another reads, "We made bread. It's awful. Thank you." Mira pins each letter to the rafters above the hearth. The paper flutters when the door opens like applause. She's slower now. Not unwell. Just full. Like a tree that's finished growing and is now just watching the orchard. She spends mornings with Saren, who has started compiling the chalk wall phrases into a small bound book titled Whispers We Didn't Know Were Ours. The introduction reads, "We were not born to be history. We were born to be held." At night, Mira writes less. She listens more. One evening, Sol curls up beside her with her own notebook. "I think I'm almost ready. For the stars, for the people who will go there." Mira smiles. "What do you want to bring?" Sol thinks. "Bread, a window, and a story." They sit in the hush that follows, where no one needs to be wise, just present. The next morning, Kiva sends a package. Inside, a photograph. A tree, leaning like they're fourth. A plaque below it that reads, "Inspired by the ones who didn't wait to be invited." There's also a note. "Tell Saul the stars are listening." Saul doesn't react, just begins drawing a rocket with roots instead of flames. By midsummer, the house begins repairs again. A loose shingle, a cracked beam. Nothing urgent but necessary. Tal leads the work, now with an apprentice, a teen named Rem who doesn't talk much but hums when measuring wood. Rem wears his hair in a nest of curls and carries 2 pencils behind his ear, even when he sleeps. He's carving a new bench, it has no straight lines. Mira loves it. "Chaos with intention," she says. Rem shrugs. "So like the house?" Exactly. That season, Mira adds one more line to the old ledger. The one that began when she first arrived, scared, stubborn, and certain she'd leave within a week. She writes, "I stayed and I would again." That night, they celebrate the 5th tree's blooming. They bring lanterns, cake, someone makes soup that's mostly cheese and apology. They dance. Not well. Not in time. But with joy. Even Trouble Senior headbutts in rhythm. At the end, Mira stands. The room hushes, not from ceremony, but because when Mira speaks, people remember how to listen. She clears her throat, places a hand on the doorframe. "I won't be here forever," she says, "but neither will the fire, and it still warms us." She looks around, at Sol, at Tal, at Lena, Dina, Saren, and Rem. At some point, one of you will notice the stew's low, or the roof is aching, or a child shows up at the gate and doesn't know their own name. She pauses, smiles. Good. That means the house is still working. And she sits. Someone plays the tree song. Someone else adds a verse about soup made from nothing that tasted like home. Sol sings the loudest, and that night Mira sleeps deeply. Not like someone retreating, like someone arriving. Autumn arrives like an old friend, familiar, unhurried, wrapped in wind. The leaves burn gold along the tree line, drifting like thoughts that decided not to stay. The 5th tree sways slightly under the weight of its first real season, shedding blossoms like laughter no longer needed. Inside the house, the hearth wakes a little earlier each day. Not for necessity, for company. Dina plays softer now, not because she's lost her fire, but because she knows when to leave space for silence. Rem has finished the bench. It's been moved under the loft window, the one that creaks when the wind leans wrong. Someone embroidered a cushion with the words, "We sat, therefore we healed." Tal has started teaching furniture carving in town twice a week. He still comes home every night, pockets full of wood shavings and someone else's questions. "I told a boy today he could build a table just to cry under," he says over dinner. He said that might be the best kind. Everyone agrees. Mira watches all of this with a heart that feels like it's wearing a soft coat, layered, patched, perfectly fitted to the weather. She no longer writes every night. Sometimes she just listens. ears tilted toward the walls like they might say something new. One morning, a letter arrives in a box. Inside, a photograph. 6 people in front of a small stone cottage, door wide open, light spilling out like soup steam. Scrawled beneath in ink, "Our first winter. The fire caught, the roof held. Thank you for the blueprint." Mira adds it to the rafter line. It flutters gently when the door opens. That same day, Saul approaches with purpose. She's taller now, wears boots that once belonged to Mira, and a jacket covered in pins. Stars, goats, a spoon with wings. "I want to take something with me," she says. Mira nods. "To the moon? To wherever comes next." "What would help you remember?" Saul thinks, then says, "The floorboard." It takes Mira a moment. Then she smiles. There's a spot near the fire, worn smooth by decades of pacing, shifting, waiting. It's been sat on, stood over, danced upon. It creaks in the shape of comfort. They pry it up together, just a sliver, just enough. Saul wraps it in cloth, places it in her satchel beside blank notebooks and a jar of lentils labeled emergency soup. "Won't the house miss it?" she asks. "No," Mira replies. "It knows where it's going." Saul leaves at dawn. No ceremony, just hugs. A thermos of tea. Trouble Senior walking her halfway down the lane before returning like nothing happened. Everyone says she'll be back. They say it the way you say, "Spring will come." Lena finds a folded note on the chalk wall later that week, written in a shaky but unmistakable hand. It reads, "Don't wait to feel ready, just begin." Below it, a sketch of a rocket with branches. The day after Sol leaves, Mira takes a long walk, not far, just beyond the edge of the orchard, where the earth is still wild enough to be interesting. She sits under a birch tree, fingers tracing the spine of her ledger. When she returns, she's smiling. She calls a house meeting. The fire pops twice, like it's confirming her decision. She clears her throat, holds up a piece of folded paper. "I've written everything I know," she says. It fits on one page. Everyone laughs, but softly. She reads, "Welcome. The kettle is to your left, the broom is to your right. If you're hungry, eat. If you're tired, sleep. If you're scared, say nothing or say everything. Either way, stay. The fire is old. The door is open. This place remembers you, even if you don't remember yourself yet. If you need rules, wash your bowl, be kind to the goats, and don't lie unless it's about who ate the last cookie. That's it. That's the house." She lowers the page. Her hands don't shake. "I think it's time," she says. No one cries. Not yet. That night, they make a feast. Bread thick with honey, soup made from too many vegetables and not enough planning, a cake that collapses in the middle and is still devoured. They sing, loudly, off-key. Dina breaks a string and keeps playing. Mira laughs so hard she nearly drops her tea. Before bed, she ties a ribbon around the old kettle. "Let it be a landmark," she says, "so no one ever forgets where comfort begins." She leaves at first light. A satchel, her ledger, the tiniest fiddle Dina could make, and a map drawn by Elle, still mostly scribbles, but one clear arrow pointing toward the sea. Lena finds the goodbye note on her bed. "Don't wait for permission. If the story calls you, follow it." Mira doesn't say where she's going. She doesn't need to. The house breathes, shifts, adjusts. Rem picks up the broom without being asked. Lena lights the morning fire. Tal teaches 2 new arrivals how to chop wood without apology, and someone, no one's sure who, adds a line to the chalk wall. "We are not missing her, we are carrying her." The rhythm shifts, but the melody holds. Mira's departure leaves no vacuum, only motion, like a wave drawing back to let others wade forward. In the days that follow, no one declares themselves the new Mira. That's not how things work here. Instead, the house adjusts the way a quilt does when someone new tucks beneath it. Rem rises earlier, Lena stays up later. Tal stops asking "should we" and begins asking "when." The fire is still lit by hand. The goats, unimpressed by all this symbolic passing of torches, continue stealing mittens and knocking over buckets. A new child arrives. She's maybe 10 or 11 or something else entirely. Her name is Ellen. She doesn't say much, just appears in the doorway one dusk with a blanket tied like a cape and a notebook filled with drawings of machines that don't exist yet. No one asks where she came from. Someone hands her tea. Lena gives her a quiet place to sit. Tal shows her how to sharpen a pencil. On her second night, she draws something on the wall beside the stairwell. A house. On wheels. Pulled by a goat. Beneath it, if it moves, it can carry more. Rem smiles when he sees it. That's what we've always done. Ellen watches everything. She follows Rem around, mimicking the way he checks for soft floorboards. She listens to Lena read and then rewrites the endings to make the monsters gentler. She asks Tal if he's ever been a monster. He doesn't answer right away, just hands her a piece of firewood and says, "Only until I knew what warmth felt like." She writes that down. Lena finds herself teaching again, not formally, but with steadiness. Each afternoon she opens the chalk wall and reads a line aloud, then waits. Someone always responds. One day, Lena reads, "We are not lost, just far from arrival." Tal replies, "Then let's build a better road." That night, they do. With string and paper and a table covered in crumbs, they sketch something strange and sprawling, a web of places like theirs. Not copies, just kindred shapes. They send the sketches in letters, to the original 6, to new ones they've only heard of in rumor. They ask questions, not instructions. What do you do when the soup runs low? How do you keep the walls warm? What does welcome sound like in your language? Answers trickle in like spring melt. Some send drawings. Others send recipes. One reply is just a leaf and a rock and a note that says, "This helped us start." Dina composes a new song called Threadwork. It has no verses, only a refrain. "All of this was never mine. All of this was always ours." Rem frames the lyrics and hangs them above the sink. A boy named Corey arrives from the coast. He brings seashells and silence. Lena gives him a window seat. Elin gives him a pencil. Tal gives him a job stacking firewood. One night, Corey asks, "What happens if we outgrow the house?" Rem answers, "Then we let it breathe bigger." Corey adds a sketch to the map table, a second structure, circular with no walls, just blankets and wind chimes. They call it the listening ring. Within a week, it's half built. Children hang bells, teens paint stars. One elder sits inside and says, "I can hear myself again." Meanwhile, the 5th tree bears fruit. Small, tart, bright as flame. They name them hope apples, not because they cure anything, but because biting into one feels like standing on a threshold. Each visitor leaves with one. No explanation, just instinct. Letters arrive daily now. One from Seoul: "I showed the floorboard to a city council. They asked if we could scale it. I said it already is." Another unsigned: "We've named ours the Lantern Room. We lit one before we opened. The moths came first, then the people." Elin starts building something. It's part wagon, part greenhouse, that part library. She says it's for someone who hasn't arrived yet. No one questions it. Lena stitches a cushion for the seat. Rem carves a door that hums when it closes. On its side, Ellen paints a message. This house was never walls. It was always invitation. One morning, Dina stops playing mid-song. She stands, walks to the 5th tree, touches its bark, then returns and says, "I think it's time I built another, elsewhere." No one protests. They help pack her fiddle, her notes, her 7 unfinished verses. Elin gives her a single hope apple wrapped in cloth. "Plant the seeds," she says. "Even if nothing grows, the trying is enough." Dina kisses the chalk wall, adds one last line. "We sang because we stayed. We stayed because someone sang." And then she leaves, humming Threadwork. The fire keeps burning. The stew simmers. The laughter echoes, sometimes in new voices, sometimes in old ones returned with different shoes and wiser eyes. At the end of that month, Tal finds a scrap of paper tucked into his tool belt. No handwriting, just 3 words stamped in charcoal: build, trust, repeat. He pins it to the doorframe, and when someone new arrives the very next day, muddy boots, unsure posture, hope clenched tight in one hand, they see it first, they hesitate, then knock, and the door, as always, opens. There's a smell in the air that only comes at the end of harvest. Not decay. Not yet, just the soft exhaustion of a season well used. Apples bruised from joy, roots heavy from remembering how to grow. Inside the house, the table is longer again, not because it was extended, because people have stopped sitting apart. A boy carves spoons at one end, at the other someone writes a poem backwards, for no reason but curiosity. The middle holds everything else: bread, elbows, laughter, plans. Rem stands at the hearth one afternoon, adjusting a beam with a slow rhythm. "What are you fixing?" Ellen asks. "Nothing's broken," he replies. "I'm just reminding it." "Of what?" "To hold." Ellen nods. She understands. She's painting now. Murals. Walls of color that bloom upward from the floor like stories with no need for beginning or end. One wall shows goats on the moon. Another is just hands, different sizes, different gestures, overlapping like waves. Corey adds music to the color, stringing bells across the rafters. "When the house breathes, it should sound like joy," he explains. And it does. Letters still come. One brings a photograph of Dina standing in front of a houseboat with solar panels and a fiddle strapped to her back. Scrawled beneath, "We're floating, we're singing, come visit." Saul writes from somewhere with red soil and blue skies. "They gave me a plot of land. I gave them a library shaped like a question. Okay? No one knows what to do with it. That means it's working." The house smiles at these things, not visibly, but you can feel it. In how the kettle whistles differently when letters arrive, in how the fifth tree leans just a little more when news is good. Lena has become a map maker, not of roads, of relationships. Her maps don't show where you're going, but who you'll find when you get there. She hangs one beside the pantry. It includes every person who's ever stayed longer than a week. Symbols, not names, no legends. If you know, you know. Visitors often stand in front of it and whisper, "I see myself." Sometimes that's enough. Tal proposes building a second structure, not to replace this, just to echo it. They debate the purpose: a barn, a dance hall, a kitchen with more space. They settle on nothing and then build it anyway. 4 walls, a roof, a doorway with no door. Inside, silence. Warm. Unexplained. They call it the answer room. People go there when they don't need advice, just space. One child sits there for 3 days with a loaf of bread and a rock named Gerald. She leaves smiling. That's all that matters. Mira hasn't written in months, but then one crisp morning a package arrives. No name. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a spoon. The paper reads, "I found a river, built a bench, left soup for anyone passing by. A man cried when he tasted it. Said it reminded him of a place he'd never been. So I told him, you were there, just late. I miss you all. The tree, the chalk, the breath between spoons. But this is good too. Light the fire. M." The spoon goes into the drawer beside the others. No one uses it, but they all touch it now and then, just to remember. Corey finds himself writing lullabies. Not for anyone in particular, just so the walls have something to hold on to at night. Ellen keeps sketching machines. Her latest design is a wind-powered book scanner. Everyone pretends to understand it. One evening, Lena finds a quiet moment and writes on the chalk wall, "This house never ends, it just changes address." Tal adds below, "Forward all soup." They laugh, and they mean it. That winter, the fifth tree drops its leaves early. The ground soaks them up without complaint. No one panics. It's just rest, not retreat. One particularly cold night, they pile into the common room. Blankets, tea, candles in every corner. Someone, no one remembers who, says, "Tell it from the start," and so they do. Alina and her broom, Alira and the borrowed door, the soup that tasted like home before anyone believed in such a thing. They pass the story like bread, adding spices along the way. Nobody cares about accuracy, they care about flavor. When it reaches Elin, she pauses, then says, "I wasn't there, but I carry it, that counts." They all nod. Later, Mira's spoon is placed at the center of the table, not to summon her, just to say, "You're still here." And as the snow falls, quiet, steady, kind, the house leans into itself, not smaller, not quieter, but fuller. Because the point was never the walls, or the fire, or even the soup. The point was always this: a place where names soften and laughter sharpens and doors forget how to close. A house that remembers you, even if you forget yourself for a while. A story that breathes through others now and will never ever stop. The river doesn't freeze this year. It sings instead. A quiet melody, running clear along its bend behind the house, threading past bare trees and the rock where someone once carved, "We begin here," and forgot to sign it. The house listens. It always has. There's a new rhythm now, less urgent, more lived in, like breath that's learned not to rush. Ellen's machine is finally finished, not the book scanner. That one caught fire. She calls this one the memory catcher. It's a box with gears and strings and no one knows what it does. She places it beside the hearth and says, "When you sit near it, it keeps what matters." Rem adds a bell to it, just in case. They trust her. That's the point. A small group of new arrivals join in late spring. A mother, her brother, and a teenager with headphones and eyes like bruised moons. They don't say much for a week. Then one night, while washing dishes, the teen mutters, "It smells like the safe part of childhood here." Lena writes it on the wall. They stay. By mid-season, Tal has built a small wooden path through the orchard, not a straight one. It weaves, pauses, circles a tree for no reason but beauty. At the end is a bench shaped like a question mark. He calls it maybe. People sit there when certainty feels like too big an ask. Corey's lullabies have been picked up by a podcast. He laughs when he hears himself from a stranger's phone. I guess the echo works both ways. Letters keep coming. One from Seoul. They put my library on the cover of a science magazine. I told them the secret. It smells like cinnamon. They didn't print that part. One from Dina. We built a floating festival. Everyone's welcome, unless they're cruel on purpose. Then they get turned into compost. And one from Mira. A single line. There's a child here with your laugh. It's unsigned. Rem places it behind the kettle, tad where steam makes the ink curl. Summer arrives soft and full. The fifth tree bears fruit again, less this time, but sweeter. Children begin naming the apples, not by number, but by memory. This one tastes like that day we all wore socks on our hands. This one is the color of Elon's machine before it exploded. This one feels like Tal's laugh when he's surprised by it. They share the apples, no hoarding. The sweetness, like everything else here, is multiplied by being offered. One evening, the teenager with the moon eyes, whose name is Quinn, performs a piece at dinner. It's not a song, not quite a poem, just a truth. They speak it slowly, hands trembling. I came with a quiet that wasn't peaceful. Now I carry a silence that feels like a choice. No one claps, they just listen harder. That night, someone pins a new phrase to the chalk wall. Some silences are worth keeping company with. The summer lingers longer than usual. They host a gathering. Not a festival, just an open day. People come from other houses, from stories, from nowhere they can name. Someone brings a loaf of bread with lavender baked in. Someone else brings a book titled, We Tried, and That's Something. Saul arrives with a suitcase full of sky blue paper and says, it's for building wings. They hang lanterns in the orchard. Children dance barefoot. Elders hum. Someone proposes marriage under the fifth tree, and someone else replies with a pie. That evening, Elon's memory catcher rings once, gently. No one touches it. They let it keep what it caught. Mira doesn't come, but she's everywhere. Her spoon sits at the head of the table now, not ceremonially, just practically. If someone new doesn't have one, Lena says, they can start here. At twilight, Rem lights every lantern again, even the one shaped like a goat. When the stars rise, they do what they've always done. They look up, then back at each other, and say, still here. Later, while cleaning, Tal finds a page tucked into the bench called Maybe, handwritten, unfamiliar. I thought home was a place that held me still, but maybe it's the hands that stayed soft when I was sharp. Maybe it's the laughter that echoed after my silence. Maybe it's this, just this. They don't know who left it, so they frame it. Hang it in the answer room. No caption, just the page. The next morning, the river sings louder, and the house, ever listening, leans slightly toward the sound. They say the sixth tree chose to grow. No one planted it. Not exactly. One day, Rem found a sprout near the garden wall, pushing through the soil like it had somewhere to be. They watched it for weeks, expecting a weed, a trick, a stutter in the season. But it kept going. By midsummer, it was undeniably a tree. Small, sure, already stubborn. Its leaves were a shade darker than the fifth, and its branches reached outward first, like it was looking for hands. Lena named it Sway. Ellen painted a stone to mark the roots. Corey sang to it every morning for a week. No one argued. Sway was here. That was enough. They didn't try to make it important. They let it be what it was. Maybe that's why it stayed. Inside, the house settled deeper into itself. Not older, just wiser. The walls no longer creaked. They conversed. The stairs didn't groan. They sighed. The pantry had developed a sense of timing, restocking its own shelves as if nudged by a memory. Ellen's memory catcher now rang weekly. Not from ghosts or spirits or anything mystical, just resonance. Someone would tell a story, the room would listen, the bell would chime, and everyone would pause. Rem eventually built a shelf for those moments, literal ones, notes written after each chime, scrawled, folded, filed. One read, I forgot what it felt like to not be afraid of tomorrow. Another, he held my hand when I reached for bread, I didn't pull away. Each note was anonymous. Each one was kept. Quinn began painting the stairwell, not murals, just shadows, hints of movement, brushstrokes that made it feel like someone was always just ahead of you, gently leading. They called it the path you didn't know you were on. That autumn, a woman named Isha arrived. She wore no shoes, carried 3 books and a piece of sky-colored glass. She asked for tea, not help. She slept 2 days straight, then woke and asked, where do you keep your silence? Lena pointed to the bench called Maybe. Isha sat there every afternoon until the first frost. Then she stood and said, "It's in good hands," and stayed. She didn't explain what she meant. She didn't have to. In early frost, Tal discovered a hole in the roof. Not large, not new, but suddenly visible. He climbed up to fix it and found a note tucked under the shingle. "It's okay to let in some weather." No signature. He left the note, fixed the leak, whistled the whole way down. Aylin began mapping the house, not rooms, but feelings. She called it the emotional floor plan. Each zone got a name. The kitchen, hope and progress. The hearth, Wolf's grief with a blanket. The back hall, Wolf's arguments, paused, not ended. She hung the map by the door with a note. "Use it if you get lost inside yourself." No one moved it, not once. Corey started translating lullabies into touch, tap codes, rhythmic claps, songs that could be shared by people who never spoke aloud. One night, Quinn fell asleep to a lullaby tapped into their back by a stranger. They woke up crying. But the good kind. The house held. Letters still came. One from Dina. "The boat grew. We added chickens. They keep terrible time, but great rhythm." One from Sol. "I planted something in space. It didn't grow, but the soil laughed. I think that counts." And one, folded in thirds, from Mira. "The river widened. Someone built a bridge beside me. They don't know it's a house yet, but they will." I told them, "If someone knocks and doesn't ask to come in, just says, 'Please let me be,' that's your start." They cried, then they swept the floor. I think it's working. No signature, just a pressed flower tucked inside, one they all recognized. Hope apple blossom. Winter came early, not bitter, just present. The fifth tree leaned, sway, the sixth, curled inward. They wrapped the trunks with old scarves and new wishes. Quinn painted the shed lavender. Aylin built a sled out of repurposed window frames and called it Certainty. It didn't work well. They loved it anyway. The pantry now included a mystery jar shelf. One child labeled it Possible Disasters. Lena added, or Potential Miracles. One night, Isha brewed a stew from 3 jars. They called it the apology that tasted better than the argument. No one remembered what they had argued about. On the last night of the year, they didn't host a party. They held still, lit 1 candle per room, spoke 1 truth each. "I'm still scared. I'm still staying." I sang to the stars, they hummed back. "I'm not done building. I know how to rest now." Quinn, I forgave myself on the stairwell. I used to think silence was a punishment. The bell on the memory catcher chimed once, then again, then stopped. They didn't write those memories down, they kept them in their ribs, just in case someone else needed them someday. When they finally slept, the fire didn't die. It just dreamed, and the house, always listening, breathed in, ready for what came next. Spring returns like a remembered song, unrushed, off-key, beloved. The snow doesn't melt, it sighs, pulls back slowly like an old friend making space. The garden stretches. Rem finds tiny green stutters near the 4th tree's roots, old seeds answering softly, "Yes, we're still here." Inside, the pantry reorganizes itself again, this time alphabetically. No one admits to doing it. Everyone denies it with suspicious delight. Elin paints a mural across the kitchen ceiling. Not pictures, colors. It swirls, dips, pauses. One visitor lies on the table and whispers, "It's what forgiveness feels like." They call it the sky we deserved. Outside, the 6th tree, Sway, puts out 2 small buds. Everyone gathers to stare at them, like they're witnessing a confession. Corey writes a song titled Bud Number 1. Quinn writes Bud Number 2 in chalk on the porch railing. Neither song is performed. Some joys are too small to be shared aloud just yet. Tal rebuilds the east windowsill with a groove for growing herbs. He installs a tiny drawer beneath it. Ellen finds it 2 days later, filled with notes. "You can sit here, even if you're not okay." The light hits just right at 4:22 p.m. There's mint if you need reminding. She labels the drawer, gentle instructions. No one moves it. A woman named Nia arrives one afternoon with a tired laugh and a box labeled, "Things I thought were worth carrying." Inside, a scarf, a book missing pages, a bell without a clapper, and a flat rock painted with the word "Stay." She asks for a place near the quiet. They give her the room that listens best. She stays. She adds nothing to the chalk wall. She paints her thoughts on her door instead. Soft gray words that change daily. "You can enter." "Not yet." "Tea first." "Just sit." No fixing. No one knocks. They just read. In late spring, someone suggests a reverse parade. No floats. No cheering. Just everyone walking slowly through the orchard in silence, remembering something kind. Each person carries one object. A a spoon, a page, a ribbon, a sock, stolen by a goat, recovered heroically. At the end, they place the objects in a circle near Sway. They call it the hearth ring, not a shrine, just a punctuation. Later that week, Lena finds a small envelope taped to the mirror. It reads, "I don't talk loud, but I hope you heard me when I stayed. M." She smiles, doesn't remove it. They make space for more envelopes. One visitor sees the wall and asks, "Is it confession?" Corey answers, "No, it's proof." Ellen adds a shelf above it labeled "Proof of Us." One morning, a stranger knocks, young, nervous, jacket too large for their frame. They say, "I heard there's a room here that tells the truth." Tal blinks, then nods. "We call it Maybe." The stranger cries, not loud, just a slow unravel. They stay. They're the first to name the goats in Latin. Quinn creates a new corner in the pantry labeled Emergency Delight. It includes chocolate, bubbles, a book titled Stop Trying, Just Sit. That week, the fifth tree sheds blossoms in a gust of wind so sudden it feels like a whisper shouted from far away. They don't mourn the petals. They collect them, dry them, hang them in jars beside the fire. Ellen labels them Gratitude, Ground. A small child, barely walking, adds a crayon drawing to the chalk wall, a yellow circle with legs. When asked, she says, "That's the sun. It's walking back." Everyone agrees. It stays up for months. Isha begins hosting listening hours. No advice. No reactions, just sitting while someone speaks and doesn't have to explain why they're still hurting. 1 hour becomes 2, then 4. Eventually, she opens a second room, names it Echo. Inside, you can talk to no one and hear everything. Visitors come specifically for it now. They bring coffee and soft questions. They leave behind quiet smiles and sometimes forgiveness. That summer, Mira writes again. No envelope, just a page folded into a paper crane, left on the porch bench. Elin unfolds it carefully. "I found the ocean. It doesn't need to be tamed. I built a small dock, not for ships, for stories. People sit there and weep, then build. I watched someone carve a door into the side of a rock, not practical, but it opened. Love to the goat. M." Lena writes back on a leaf and places it in the wind. No one expects it to arrive, but that's not the point. Corey sings at twilight now. Not for audience, for the orchard, for the stairwell, for the version of himself who didn't know this place could exist. One evening, Nia sets her box of things worth carrying beside the fire, emptied. She leaves a note inside. "Turns out I didn't need most of it. Thank you for showing me." Tal finds a single stone from the hearth ring cracked open by weather. Inside, a tiny crystal, nothing dramatic, just a shimmer. He holds it up and says, "This house shines, even on the inside," and it does. Even as night returns sooner, even as the fire creaks from its long labor, even as the pages in the ledger grow full, the house holds and sways and sings, still open, still listening, still, always, beginning. Some days begin quietly, others begin with soup. This one starts with both. Lena wakes early and finds Corey already in the kitchen, stirring something warm and gold in the pot. "What is it?" she asks. "Memory," he says, "and a little turmeric." She laughs, not because it's funny, but because it's true. By noon, the smell fills the house. People wander in without speaking, bowl in hand, drawn not by hunger but by recognition. Rem adds toasted seeds. Ellen sprinkles dried apple peel. The teenager who never gives their name contributes a single drop of honey and says, "I don't like sweet things, but this is worth it." They call it stillness soup. No one writes the recipe down. Not because it's secret, because it won't taste the same again, and that's okay. Outside, Sway leans, not in pain, in presence, as if showing how a tree bends when listening to a story it doesn't want to miss. The sixth tree is taller than anyone expected. Its fruit, when it comes, is pale and strange, like moonlight made edible. They name it Hush Fruit. Quinn paints the orchard paths with chalk symbols, spirals, eyes, tiny open doors. They don't explain them. They just say, if someone gets lost, let the shapes remind them. Tal builds birdhouses from old bowls. Not one gets used. He doesn't mind. They're not for birds, he says. They're for hope. Ellen constructs a weather vane shaped like a question mark. It points in directions the compass doesn't understand. They hang it above the new porch. Label it, where we might go. Naya begins weaving again, not baskets, phrases. She stitches them into blankets, scarves, curtain hems, soft declarations hidden in the folds. You were not too much. You did the best you could. Rest is not retreat. One visitor cries when they find one in a pillowcase. No one says a word. They just refill the tea. A letter arrives from Mira. folded into the shape of a boat. They find it floating in the rain barrel. I'm further now, but closer too. The new place has no walls, but everyone feels held. One person brought silence and didn't apologize for it. Another brought drums. Both were needed. I keep a ribbon from the fifth tree in my pocket. It hums sometimes. I think that means you're singing again. M. The note is hung beside the map of relationships, not as a destination, as a frequency. A new child arrives, hair like ink, shoes too small, voice sharp from disuse. They don't stay in one place. One moment curled under a stair, the next balancing on the well wall. Lena doesn't chase them, just leaves a cup of milk and a slice of bread on the windowsill. After 3 days, the child asks, "Do I have to earn it?" Corey answers, "You already did, by arriving." The child sleeps on the floor for a week before choosing a bed. They name themselves Patch. No one corrects them. Ellen gives them a coat with too many pockets and says, "Fill these, slowly." Tal teaches Patch how to sand wood. Naya teaches them how to sit still with a heavy heart and not apologize. Patch leaves a note in the soup drawer. "I didn't think warmth could be so quiet." That night, the fire pops loudly. The whole room cheers. The ledger, once Mira's, is now shared. Anyone can write in it. There are no rules, only ink. Recent entries include, "Held someone while they fell apart. We were both whole after." Built a bench for the moon. It hasn't sat yet, but I'm patient. Found a tooth in the garden. No idea why. Still grateful. Someone adds a drawing of a spoon wearing a crown. It becomes a minor legend among the children. They call her Queen Stuthia. She reigns with kindness and one stern eye. The chalk wall runs out of space, so they paint a second wall, then a third. Eventually the hallway becomes a tunnel of remembered sentences. Visitors walk it slowly, touch the words they need. Some bring new paint, some bring silence. Both offerings are accepted. A letter from Saul arrives on a paper made from pressed flower petals. It reads, "They say we're building a school, but it's really a question. What if the first thing children learn is you matter before you produce? We had to unlearn it. They won't have to. Love you all, especially the goats. S." Rem posts it beside the goat's pen. One of the goats immediately eats the corner. Everyone agrees. The message still counts. That spring, a tree grows near the shed. No one knows who planted it. It's not aligned with the orchard. Its leaves shimmer strangely, like they're deciding which color to be. They don't name it. They wait. Some things name themselves when they're ready. On the last night of the season, they gather in the kitchen again. The soup is less perfect than before. Too much pepper, not enough warmth. Still they eat. Still they smile. Lena lifts her bowl and says, "To the things we tried before we were good at them." Ellen adds, "To the people we became when no one was watching." Tal, "To the trees that didn't need permission." Patch, "To the coats with many pockets." Corey, "To the song that didn't need an audience." Quinn whispers, "To the house, for holding." They all nod. Outside, the sixth tree sways, and the wind carries a soft chime from the bell above the porch, the one that rings only when the story remembers itself. They sleep deeply, not from exhaustion, but from arrival. It begins with dust motes. Not dramatic, not magical, just light catching what's always been there. The morning sun cuts across the main room in long, warm bands, the kind you could lie down in and feel forgiven. No one's awake yet, but the house is. It stretches quietly, wood expanding in the warmth, the windows adjusting their size. The fifth tree nudges its shadow through the east wall like it wants to come inside. On the porch, someone's left a slipper, half a sandwich, a drawing of a goat on a rocket. Life perfectly unfinished. Patch is first to stir. They wander through the kitchen barefoot, dragging a blanket like a title they're not ready to give up. They pour a glass of water, drink half, and set the rest beside the kettle. Not for themselves, just in case someone else needs it. Tal joins a little later, stepping over a sock, a paper crown, and a pile of hopeful wood. He doesn't clean up, he just notes them. Proof of joy, he mutters. Outside, the sixth tree, still unnamed, blooms in a way that feels deliberate, like a promise finally answered. Its flowers are soft gold with a blue sheen, as if twilight kissed them just before dawn. They all gather to watch, even the goats. Naya places a single hand on the trunk. "She's ready," she says, not knowing if she means the tree or herself. Elin sketches in a new notebook. The cover reads, "Last book, first map." She doesn't explain what it means. She doesn't need to. That afternoon, They repaint the front door. It isn't chipped or faded, but it's time. They choose a color no one can agree on, a shade between seafoam and old memory. They laugh at every brushstroke. Patch adds a spiral in the bottom corner, so we remember to keep going. No one disagrees. Corey plays a song he never rehearsed. It stumbles, recovers, soars briefly, and lands gently. "I'll never play it again," he says. "You don't have to," replies Quinn. "We heard it." Lena stands in the orchard that evening with Mira's old ledger pressed against her chest. She reads one entry aloud. "We didn't save the world. We just made a room in it. That was enough." She closes the book, then opens it again, just to hold the act of reopening. Dinner is messy, beautiful, loud in all the right ways. Someone burns the bread. Someone else drops a bowl. Patch tries to juggle apples and hits Tal on the shoulder. He pretends it was on purpose. They name the stew attempt number 41 and declare it a masterpiece. A visitor they've never seen before brings a jar labeled "Pickled Surprises." No one asks what's inside. They all try it anyway. Afterward, they write new phrases on the chalk wall. "Risk is a flavor." "I stayed longer than I meant to. I'm better for it." This house made space before it made rules. Later, Nia gathers them in the answer room. She doesn't speak right away. She just opens the windows, lets the breeze through like it's earned the right to be here. Then, softly, "We've been holding this together for so long. Maybe it's time to let it hold us." No one nods, no one claps, they just breathe, and that is enough. The next morning, a letter arrives, unmarked, folded carefully. Inside a line, "If this is the last chapter, let it end like a door slightly open." Beneath it, a drawing of the house, not as it is, but as it's remembered. Too many windows, a tree growing from the roof, laughter spilling out like smoke. They pin it above the sink. A new child arrives that evening. She says nothing, carries a bag, a button, and a blanket. Quinn greets her with tea and a question. "What part of the story are you?" The girl thinks, then says, "The comma." And everyone laughs, with that kind of recognition that feels like coming home to a version of yourself you didn't know you missed. That night, they sit by the fire, floor crowded, laps full of dishes, hearts oddly steady. Ellen looks around and whispers, "We're not the same people who began this." Lena smiles, "No, but we're the reason someone else can." They toast to that with water, soup, and one stolen sip of something stronger. Then silence. Not emptiness, just fullness with nowhere else to be. Someone, maybe Mira, maybe not, once said, "The end isn't when the story stops, it's when the story becomes yours to tell." So they keep telling it, in drawings, in bread, in laughter, in the creak of stairs that remember your weight long after you've left. The house doesn't end. It leans, it grows, it welcomes, still open, still unfinished, still entirely enough. And now, dear traveler, if you've made it here through soup spoons, moonfruit, chalk walls, and the door that never really closed, then you've stayed long enough to be part of the house. This isn't just a story you listened to, it's a place you visited. Maybe you lived in the stairwell. Maybe you brewed tea beside the goats. Maybe you whispered something to the unnamed tree. Whatever you carried here, we hope you found somewhere to set it down. So, now it's your turn. Leave us a comment, a thought, a favorite line, a moment that lingered longer than expected. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what time it is. Tell us what color you'd paint your own front door. And if this space felt like a quiet room you didn't know you needed, please subscribe. That's how you help keep the kettle warm, the fire stoked, and the next story ready for someone else who might be a little lost. Thank you for sitting with us. We'll see you again, somewhere between a soup that remembers you and a stairwell that leads exactly where you didn't expect.